Happy Tuesday! Welcome to the Sean O'Connell Show. Happy to be with you. A Utah football bye week. Still plenty to discuss here in this local sports market. Jazz Media Day was yesterday. Sarah Todd is going to stop by, talk about takeaways from that and what we should look forward to in this upcoming NBA season. Gordy Chiesa going to swing by and talk about a lot of the same stuff. Jeff Schwartz will join me in hour number 3. Riley Nelson at 12:30 for a little red and blue. BYU, one of these surprise teams, not just in the Big 12 Conference, but in the country at 5-0. We'll get into all of that on the show today. Yesterday, we didn't really get into it on a Monday, reacting to the loss to the University of Arizona and talking other things. We didn't really get it. It was a very sad day in sports yesterday. 2 very high-profile athletes, it was made public that they passed. Dikembe Mutombo, the NBA legend, one of the great defensive players and shot blockers of all time in the NBA. An incredible humanitarian, by all accounts, a wonderful human being, passed away after a battle with brain cancer. And it's just devastating when you hear someone who dies prematurely, who dies young. And he was only in his 50s.
58, if I'm not mistaken.
58 is very, very young. And brain cancer, all cancer, is just pernicious and horrible. And I hope someday soon it's wiped off the face of the earth. Dikembe Mutombo passing. Look, I don't know these people. We don't know these people. But someone whose legacy is one of positivity, and after his career of humor, because he kind of became a jokester of sorts, and obviously of philanthropy. You can go and read dozens and dozens and dozens of articles and accounts of Dikembe Mutombo giving away an intense amount of money, an insane amount of his own time, and wanting to improve the lives of folks, not only here domestically, but in Africa, in Congo, where he was born, in Mozambique, where he spent time as he kind of traveled to eventually get to the NBA. He was a philanthropist of the highest order. Like, there is medical infrastructure in place on the African continent that would not exist without Dikembe Mutombo's donations and his efforts and his care. So, very sad that Dikembe Mutombo has passed. And then Pete Rose, the baseball legend, at 83, passed away yesterday also. And these things were announced hours apart from one another. And Dikembe Mutombo, I think Dan Patrick was talking about this, Dikembe Mutombo got washed over in the wave of discussion because Pete Rose is a more compelling discussion point because of the controversy of his life. Dikembe Mutombo has a very uncomplicated legacy.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
It's pretty straightforward. Like, you were a great defensive player who was also, by all accounts, a phenomenal and generous human being. That's pretty uncomplicated. I would like, when it's all said and done for me, to have an uncomplicated legacy.
You know,
The chances of that are probably not nearly as high, right? Pete Rose has a very complicated legacy for sports fans. 877-353-0700. The question I have for you today, and I would like for you to answer at Real OC Sports on Twitter. Also, I put it out on the tweet. The greatest athlete with a complicated legacy. For whatever reason or whatever you call a complicated legacy, who is that for you? The person who you were probably an admirer or a fan of what they were as an athlete and as a competitor, but the complication maybe comes in with the stuff that happened away from the field, the court, the pitch, the ice, whatever it is. The greatest athlete for you with a complicated legacy. And we don't have to go far to look to find someone who is an undeniably great competitor with a complicated legacy. 877-353-0700. as I thought about this, and I thought about Pete Rose, and I thought about the fact that today and yesterday, a lot of the discussion was like, well, what are we going to say about Pete Rose when it's all said and done? And DP had, you should go listen on the ESPN 700 app if you get a chance. He had Johnny Bench on, who was obviously long-standing relationship with Pete Rose. And there's anger there. There's regret all over the place, secondhand regret on behalf of Pete Rose for the fact that what he was as a player, which is just undeniably Hall of Fame, all-time great Mount Rushmore status, especially as a hitter, is muddied and complicated and in a lot of ways ruined by the gambling problems, and a lot of people call it an addiction that he had. So who's a great athlete or player with an incredibly complicated legacy? 877-353-0700. Karl Malone is the obvious answer for me with the local ties.
I thought you were going to go Joe Montana, but okay.
Joe Montana has an uncomplicated legacy. Don't put Joe Montana's name in your mouth, okay? Karl Malone has a very complicated legacy because as a competitor, as an athlete, he exhibited all of the admirable qualities that you want as a player. Now, if you're David Robinson, you might not feel that way, but consummate competitor, incredibly tough, good teammate in most cases, actually had some kind of investment and care in the fan experience. I mean, he went public many times saying like, hey, I know that there's a dad or a mom who brought their kids and it's the only time they can afford the ticket or they traveled from however far away to watch me play. I'm not going to sit out. He was very critical of that first wave of load management that was happening while he was still a player. So Karl Malone, as a basketball player, there was not a lot left to be desired. He was amazing. And then you get into what Karl Malone was as a human being, and all of a sudden you don't want to wear that number 32 Jazz jersey anymore. That's what I'm talking about with a complicated legacy. And it is complicated. It's not simple and straightforward in a lot of cases because you're like, well, who am I to judge? Is it my business, the kind of relationship he has with his son? Not really. Some of the stuff going all the way back to when he was in Louisiana is universally reviled. So, complicated legacy for you. 877-353-0700. A lot of texts coming in. This one's interesting for me from 4909. Josh Gordon. I didn't think we were going to see that name. Obviously spent a semester here at the University of Utah, mostly sitting in a dorm room getting high. But, like, Josh Gordon, how complicated is that legacy? There is no legacy.
I mean, no. But I mean, if anything, it was a squandering of ability.
Yeah, I think that may be part of a better conversation about, like, the best that never were.
Yeah.
Is one of the great things. There's a great 30 for 30 on that, actually. And we all have high school teammates, college teammates, little league friends, whatever, that if they just would have stayed on the right path, could have been somebody. And Josh Gordon could have been a Hall of Fame wide receiver.
100%. He had all the ability in the world. Was a freak. There's just, I mean, Kyle, I've heard Kyle talk about him, and he's just like blown away by the ability, but it's just, he did it to himself.
You know what's interesting is I remember, this would have been, I guess, 10 years ago almost now, when his name came up for some reason, and there was the debate, the question that day was, is he a Ute? Like, do you talk about him as a Ute? And everybody, every fan, every call, every interaction from a person that was listening was like, no, he's not a Ute. He didn't do anything. He was like, he never made the sacrifices necessary. He didn't change his behavior. He didn't get rid of his problem so that he could be a Ute, so that he could do something for the Utes. And then Isaac Asiata, of all people, weighed in and said, he's a Ute. He was my teammate, and we all loved him, and he's a Ute. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. So, look, there are guys out there who have complicated legacies with their own teammates.
Right.
Michael Jordan is a great example of that.
Kobe Bryant.
Kobe Bryant is a great example of that.
Shaq.
So, the great athletes who also have a complicated legacy, some really good ones coming in. Dennis Rodman from 97-65. John Jones.
That's a great example.
John Jones, for those of you who are not combat sports fans, not MMA fans, not UFC fans, John Jones is the best fighter in mixed martial arts, which is still a very young sport. He's the best ever, okay? As an actual fighter, he's the best.
No doubt.
He has no real losses on his record. The lone loss on his record came in what was a very dominant performance for him where he threw an illegal strike and got disqualified because of it.
An elbow, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, a 12-6 elbow, a vertical elbow, which always should have been legal and is now, and is ridiculous that it was ever outlawed. But John Jones threw that knowing it was illegal and got disqualified for it. But it's a loss on a technicality. Everything else, and it's a who's who. He was the youngest UFC champion ever. He's been the longest reigning UFC champion ever. But steroid suspension, cocaine suspension,
car accident,
hit and run accident where he broke the arm of a pregnant woman and fled the scene. Like, he's not a good dude. Domestic violence allegations.
Multiples, right?
He's not one of those people you're just like, yes, son, yes, daughter, look up to that athlete. So that's a pretty complicated legacy because as a competitor, you can't find anyone who's a better example of what you're trying to be in the sport in terms of wins, in terms of dominance. But you're like, man, nobody likes the guy. His own coaches, his own teammates,
yeah.
Like, people don't like the guy.
Like, if Jackson Wink isn't messing with you, that ain't good.
And I've interacted with John several times, and he's always been very cordial. He's been very nice. Some people thought I was even being combative when I interviewed him. I wasn't trying to be, and he was nothing but respectful and nice to me. But I'm looking at him, right? I'm like, first of all, that's the baddest dude, and we fought in the same weight class, and he's way bigger and way better than me. But I'm just like, all right, that's the guy right there. And he was very nice to me, but I'm like, I don't really buy it. Thank you for being nice, but I kind of don't believe you.
So it seemed disingenuous.
Because of my own thoughts on him, he was probably being as genuine as he knows how to be.
Right.
Like, I put that on myself because, again, the complicated legacy. Because what I know, and because I'm more judgmental probably than I should be, I'm just like, I don't know, man. I don't know if you and I are kind of the same kind of person. So this conversation is useful for both of us, I hope, but I don't think we're friends, or it probably ever would be. I don't know. That's a complicated legacy. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, another guy that's super complicated related to P. Rose, Barry Bonds. Like, that guy as a whole, obviously, there's been all these allegations around him of, steroid use, but also that he wasn't a good dude. I mean, obviously he was never a good dude to the media. That's well documented, but there's even teammates that have gone on record that they were not fans of him. And so, going into the Hall of Fame discussion, it's kind of hard to back a guy like that when you've seen kind of what has gone on with him, right? And so there's him. Locally, another guy, I'm curious to see how it pans out, Donovan Mitchell. That'll be a very interesting conversation down the road.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you've heard, like, the good and the bad, right? And even yesterday in media days, he talked about when he got to Cleveland, he's like, okay, food's good here. People seem chill. I like this place. Like, obviously that's going to irk Jazz fan too.
Yeah, I mean, we had a caller, remember, when, like, kind of went off on Donovan Mitchell. And the perspective is different. Like, hey, Donovan Mitchell doesn't like us, and we did everything for him. Donovan Mitchell put in a lot of effort while he was in Salt Lake City to be a member of this community, more than anyone else, more than guys who have very uncomplicated legacies here. He would show up at high school football games. He was doing charity stuff. He was out there with the kids in the community, shaking hands, kissing babies. Like, Donovan Mitchell put in the time and effort that a lot of players, probably on the advice of their own agents and maybe even their teammates, don't do. Like,
right.
he did that. And I think he still had some experiences where he felt like he was an outsider. And I think that made him feel some type of way, and he's said some things since then. And that, for some folks, for that caller and a lot of people who agree with that caller, has complicated Donovan Mitchell's legacy in Salt Lake City. I think he has a very uncomplicated legacy here.
I agree with that.
Like, for me, Donovan Mitchell is just like, he was a great player who maxed out his potential in Salt Lake City. There was a bit of a schism between him and the second best player on the team in Rudy Gobert, and it became untenable, and that's just the way things are. That one, for me, doesn't fall into my category of complicated legacy, but I could see why it would be for a lot of Jazz fans.
Let me ask you this, because this is one where it's kind of in the same realm as Donovan Mitchell. The ayahuasca enthusiast, Aaron Rodgers.
He's on TV right now.
He's on TV right now, ironically. Like, do you think he has a complicated legacy?
Yes. I think that until 4 years ago, it was pretty straightforward for Aaron Rodgers, where he was a great player and a generationally great quarterback talent who probably was not supported in an ideal fashion by his organization. The Packers did not use draft picks to surround him with offensive talent, right? And recently, more recently, I think Aaron Rodgers has been a guy who's like, oh, maybe you're actually the problem. Maybe you got one Super Bowl because of you, not just because the Packers didn't utilize draft picks and salary cap to help you. Maybe your teammates don't love you. Maybe your own family doesn't talk to you. Like, there's something there, right?
Yeah. No, that's a big red. Granted, culturally, my culture, it's all family all the time, right? And to me, if your family isn't communicating with you, that's a giant red flag. Giant red flag.
And look, I have no horse in that race. I don't know who's in the right or who's in the wrong.
Right.
When it's something like that. And I can only put it in the context of my own family. And right or wrong, my family is not ostracizing me, cutting me off, or even permitting me to cut them off for any reason. For any reason. I could become the worst human being on the planet, and my mom's still going to talk to me, probably to yell at me, probably to tell me she's disappointed, but not just going to, like, leave it at that.
Right.
So, again, yeah, complicated legacy, I think, for Aaron Rodgers. You know whose legacy is completely uncomplicated and probably needs to be complicated?
Who's that?
Tom Brady.
Oh, that's a solid example.
So Tom Brady, again, and this is all based, when I say complicated legacy, these are like subjective, excuse me. These are like your opinion on this, okay? Tom Brady is universally respected and beloved, and the Tom Brady roast was one of the great comedic things we've seen in the last 5 years. Tom Brady is not necessarily a good dude. I know that there are some teammates who love him. There are a bunch of teammates, especially in the later part of his career, that were just like, gosh, this guy's exhausting. And far be it for me to cast aspersions on anyone's personal life and what they do, especially romantically. But Tom Brady choosing football over his family.
Party foul.
Pretty significant.
Yeah.
And also, Tom Brady abandoning his then pregnant girlfriend for Giselle, not ideal. Which
also, if you really think about it, doesn't get brought up all too often.
Ever. And that's not like the Karl Malone stuff never really got brought up because it was like you didn't know what was true and what wasn't. It wasn't reported on successfully in accurate detail for a long time. Like when he was in his prime, when he was coming up through, there was a lot of questions about who said what and what's real and what's not. Now we kind of know the facts. Now we're in the social media era and everyone's a journalist. And like, we know it was pretty awful stuff way back when.
Yeah.
Tom Brady, his stuff was going on like in that era. And there was just kind of a willful, like, okay, that's rough, but it's legal and it's technically fine. And okay, we're not going to talk about it. And so Tom Brady, for me, has more of a complicated legacy than for most people, I think.
I mean, another guy that kind of comes to mind too, even though after he passed, it wasn't treated the same as Kobe. I'm a big Kobe fan myself, right?
Mhm.
But even the stuff that he did with the scandals, if you will,
Yeah.
unexcusable, right? Inexcusable. And that was even tough to digest because there was a trial and the whole, like, it was a lot.
Dude, it's like there's a lot to process when you're talking about these athletes, and especially if they run afoul of the law. But I think it's a great question, and we got some great answers. I don't want to gloss over any of these just because I like to talk too much. 94-21, Tyreek Hill. Yes, you're absolutely right. Tyreek Hill is like one shade off of Ray Rice, and yet he's celebrated and talked about as a great receiver in the league instead of being ostracized. Tyreek Hill, bad news. Mike Tyson. Several people have brought up Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson is, Pete Rose with the betting stuff, very complicated. Mike Tyson has an incredibly complicated legacy because we've seen it. The pendulum has swung twice.
Yeah.
On Mike Tyson. Everybody loved him. Oh, my gosh, this is the greatest heavyweight, most devastating power puncher ever in the history of the sport. Okay, he's a convicted rapist. Okay, he's a domestic abuser. He admitted on camera that the best punch he threw to that certain point, he thought it was a funny joke, was on his wife. Like, that's awful. That is unforgivable, terrible, horrible stuff, right? Served his prison time, came out on the other side, the whole biting Evander Holyfield's ear, just more a mess of behavior, all of it. And then he goes through this post-career renaissance where he does the Hangover movie and he does the Mike Tyson one-man show, and he makes all these appearances, and he becomes an investor and kind of a figurehead in a lot of these very successful businesses. And suddenly Mike Tyson is, for a lot of people, a pop culture hero and a sympathetic figure even, because you get more details about how many folks were just dipping their hand into the honeypot and taking from Mike and taking from Mike and taking from Mike and never really truly supporting him. That's a complicated one. Ray Lewis coming in, 92-79.
Super complicated one.
I'll tell you what. That one, for me, individually, like Ray is one of our investors in the Professional Fighters League, and I've gotten to know Ray decently well. Spent a lot of time around Ray now. I'm not going to gloss over. I'm friendly with Ray Lewis. Like we're friends. We're buddies.
Yeah.
We're not friends. Like he's not going to call me, but every time I see him,
you're friendly.
We're happy to see each other. We have an interesting conversation. He's been nothing but great to me.
Dap him up, say, please don't kill me.
Asks about family, that kind of stuff, right? And then in the back of your mind, you have this thing where just like, I know what the accusations are and were. It's crazy. Complicated legacies. How about this one coming in? 38-69, Urban Meyer.
That's a super interesting one.
Okay.
But hold on real quick with Ray, because for me, I didn't get into football until late, right?
Yeah.
So with those accusations, for those folks that are maybe a little too young to even understand, what even came about that?
Somebody else served time for an incident that happened. And that is the question. Was that a fall guy? Was that someone who actually perpetrated the violence? And there's a lot of things, anecdotally and documented, that point to the fact that that was an executive decision made to protect, much like the Karl Malone situation. There was an executive decision made by both families in that situation to protect the success of the man who made it out. And that's why we call these legacies complicated, because it's very difficult to talk about some of these things as black and white. Like Adrian Peterson. We got an Adrian Peterson text. Adrian Peterson. The line that Adrian Peterson crossed from being a harsh disciplinarian of his children to being an abuser of his children washes out everything for me that Adrian Peterson ever did good. And he did a lot of really good things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In fact, my younger brother is special needs and has benefited greatly from the Special Olympics program. And Adrian Peterson is a huge proponent, supporter, longtime face of Special Olympics prior to a lot of his issues. Like, that one is, like, for my family, is personally impactful and important and wonderful. And still, I look at Adrian Peterson, and I'm just like, no, man. If you abuse a child, if you hurt a child, I'm all the way out. Like, sorry, I'm done. But other people look at it and say, come on. So he smacked his kid a little harder than he should have. I draw a line in other places. That's why I'm talking about complicated. And I want to make it clear that my judgment doesn't have to be your judgment. And I'm not standing on a soapbox telling you how you should feel about some of these things. Some of them, we better be on the same page. But with Pete Rose and scandal and betting, I mean, really? The man died at 83 years old as one of the greatest hitters ever yesterday. And he died without having achieved the thing that his actual gameplay earned him, Hall of Fame status.
I mean, he was called the Hit King. That was his nickname.
Charlie Hustle.
Charlie Hustle.
He was a human highlight reel. I just saw a graphic they put up on ESPN that, like, in the best year of pitching that Major League Baseball ever saw, he hit 353.
Which is still insane. It's insane.
Like,
he played on one of the most prolific offenses ever, the Big Red Machine.
Probably the best lineup in the history of the National League.
Yeah.
And he dies, and unfortunately, the conversation once again gets brought up. But look what also he did. Look what his problems were also.
And then now it gets even murkier because obviously it gets even more complicated with parody because people were even tweeting out, condolences to Pete Rose, passed away at 83. This baseball moment brought to you by whatever betting website.
By DraftKings Sportsbook. Yeah,
Yeah.
dude. It's like, that feels really gross.
It does. But that's where we're at. It's a weird.
It's we've gone over this before with Reggie Bush, who his legacy is complicated, right? Because Reggie Bush is now, like, it looked like it was going to get fixed, and now he's suing again. And it's just like, okay, you're deciding to keep it complicated. But in any case, 877-353-0700. Keep them coming in. We've got some really great suggestions. Lance Armstrong has come in. Justin Blackman, I like that one. Justin Blackman from Oklahoma State. That's a really good one. Pretty deep cut. OJ has come in. Tiger Woods. Several answers for Tiger Woods. We'll get back into this discussion because there's a lot of great athletes who you can't just say, ha, I'm a big fan of yours. End of story. Because you know something else. So the best athletes, the best players, your favorites who have complicated legacies. 877-353-0700 at Real OC Sports. Opening segment always brought to you by Alvi Armani. If you're having hair loss issues, or even if you're worried that those hair loss issues are in your future, it's thinning, it's receding, doesn't matter. They can help you out. Gentlemen, ladies, anyone under the sun, the technology is there. AlviArmani.com. Sarah Todd joins me to talk a little NBA action and the Utah Jazz after their media day yesterday, and then we'll get back into this complicated legacies discussion. Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700. We're getting some great responses on the text line, 877-353-0700 for the Dish Pro text line. You can also call us. We'll get to it in about 15 minutes. Complicated legacies, great athletes with complicated legacies in respect to the passing of Pete Rose, who is one of the original great athletes with a complicated legacy. But right now, time to talk a little Utah Jazz with Utah Jazz beat reporter at the Deseret News, host of the Unsalvageables podcast, Sarah Todd at NBA Sarah on the old tweet machine. Kind enough to join the show for the very first time on the Sean O'Connell Show. Sarah, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate you giving us some time. I'm going to involve you in the greater discussion of the show. I started with a question for everyone out there. The greatest athlete, maybe your favorite athlete who has a complicated legacy, or just the best example you can think of a great player who might have been questionable in other areas of life. Is there anyone that sticks out for you?
I mean, I don't think you have to leave Utah to find that. Karl Malone is right there for the choosing. So.
Yeah. That was the first one that came up in my mind when I was like, okay, what about people with connections to the state of Utah? And I was like, oh, yep, that's an easy one. The mailman. So, all right. Yeah, a lot of people texting that one in as well. But let's talk about the modern-day Utah Jazz as we head into another season right around the corner. Media Day yesterday. The purple is back. The purple mountain jersey's looking great. First of all, your overall sense at Media Day of kind of like it's always an optimistic time of year while everyone is 0-0 and you don't know what it's going to play out like. This is a young roster, I think, with a lot of upside, but a limited amount of upside. So what was the vibe, for lack of a more professional question?
Yeah, I mean, it was, first day of school vibes, right? Like everyone's back and everyone's feeling good right now. They don't have the losses of the season to kind of make them jaded as the year goes along. 82 games is a very long season, and so it's never as great as Media Day is, especially for a team that's on a rebuild like the Jazz. But I think that one of the things that stuck out to me yesterday in talking with everyone is that everyone gets it. Like, everyone gets where the team is. No one is going into this season thinking like, oh, we're playing for a championship. Like, that's the goal this season. That's not to say that the players don't want to win games, but like, they're also not blind and they're not stupid. They can look at the roster. They see that there's 7 players under 23 years old. They know that the goal of the front office and directive given to Will Hardy is that the focus this season needs to be on developing young players. And so they know what's going to be happening this season. There's going to be a lot of minutes with a lot of really young, inexperienced players on the floor. And, unfortunately, that does not equal wins in the NBA very often. And so that's what we're kind of in for this year.
All right. So I agree with you. And you get to the point of, all right, what's the ceiling for a team like this? And if we know the ceiling is probably not the playoffs, how aggressively do we even want to pursue that ceiling because of how tanking is a conversation in the NBA? So I guess we'll start with, what is the ceiling? In a best-case scenario, how does it play out in the win-loss column for the Jazz?
Yeah, I don't actually think that's the right way to frame this season at all. The ceiling doesn't need to be worried about, like, from a team standpoint. The framing for the season is, can we find a baseline for one or two of these young players that makes us think they have the potential to grow into something that is really good for the future of the team and can raise the ceiling 2-3 years down the road? And so that's why you're going to see a lot of minutes out of Taylor Hendricks, Keontae George, Bryce Sensabaugh, Isaiah Collier, Cody Williams, Kyle Filipowski. Like, if you were actually going to talk about the ceiling of that team, I'd be like, the ceiling is the floor, because they're starting at the very, very beginning. These are young players with no real necessarily competitive NBA experience. And that's not the point. The point is not to get wins. I mean, frankly, I think that the Jazz brass would be very happy if the ceiling was literally the floor, because on the horizon in the 2020 draft is Cooper Flagg and Ace Bailey, Dylan Turner, all of these really, really good players that could help raise the ceiling of a team. And so thinking about how many wins could this team get, honestly, if I was a fan, I'd be thinking more, can we get Keontae George playing better defense by the end of the season while also racking up some losses?
So how does Lauri Markkanen, an all-star caliber player, fit into that? Because we have this conversation all the time about draft positioning. It's very difficult to ask players and very difficult to ask coaches to stink and to tank and to find that balance of, hey, you're developing, but you're developing in a way that doesn't necessarily lead to wins. And especially with somebody like Lauri, who you've now financially invested in, you've committed to long-term, and other teams were very, very interested. Where does he fit in that picture? Because I don't think you're wrong in your assessment of like the best outcome for the Jazz, but how do you fit an all-star into that?
Yeah, well, I mean, they had all-star Lauri Markkanen on the team last year and were in the lottery. So I don't think that that's necessarily going to be a problem. If you think about the last 2 years with Lauri, the team didn't start out the season with like this ultimate directive of develop the young guys. They started out the last 2 seasons of like, all right, go out and see what we can do. Let's see where we are as a team. Let's see where the ceiling is, exactly that original framing. And then when it was like, oh, our ceiling is actually probably play-in, that's when they make trades. The Jazz front office massages the roster so that Will Hardy's coaching basically with one arm behind his back. No one is going to ever ask the players to tank, the players to lose games, or ask Will Hardy to go out and intentionally lose games. It's the front office who is responsible for making sure that the roster is not capable of winning enough games to take them out of high draft position. And so when you think about this season, they're not starting it out with, Kelly Olynyk and Jordan Clarkson and Lauri Markkanen and all of them trying to go out and win games to start the season. They're probably going to start a couple of the rookies or maybe a couple of the rookies from last season along with Lauri Markkanen. And like it or not, no matter how good Lauri Markkanen is, if he's playing a majority of his time with a bunch of young players, that does not make it easy for him to win. He can win a few games by himself in the NBA, but it is a team sport for a very good reason. And so I think that going through like the hurdles and the learning curves and the only person on the scouting report pretty much. And then in turn, those young players playing heavy minutes with Lauri Markkanen is going to make them better. Are all 6 of those rookies and rookies from last season going to hit and going to be great and going to develop into something great this season? No. Next season, also no. Like, you're not going to hit on every draft pick that you get. But if you can really figure out, like, oh, okay, Keontae George is actually a point guard that we can utilize for the future. He's learned how to play pick and roll really well with Lauri, pick and pop. He's playing better defense. Oh, and actually, Cody Williams is somebody that's going to be a really versatile key guy in the future. And then if you can make those determinations over the next year or two and find 2 guys that are really good and then use those as a foundation and then use all the other future draft picks and assets that you have to make trades and bring in other good players, that's when you start to build up to wins. But like the question being like, do I think that this team with Lauri Markkanen can lose a lot of games? Absolutely.
Sarah Todd, our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking Utah Jazz. Just had their media day yesterday. As long as we're talking about Lauri Markkanen, I just saw this. Maybe you can verify. Reports out there that Markkanen passed on a Netflix opportunity with starting 5. Last year it was Jimmy Butler, Anthony Edwards, LeBron, Sabonis, and Jason Tatum. Is there any credence to this? Do we know if he actually did turn this down?
Yeah, he did. He was approached about it, and it seems like it was a pretty easy decision for him to make. He said that, things are very good, and it's fine to have cameras around when you're all happy and you're winning and everything's great. He's like, but what about when things go sideways? And he was like, I just know that I'm not the type of person that would want to have a bunch of cameras around and in a locker room, and especially with where the team is right now and they're trying to develop guys. Like, that's not going to be a fun, happy place all the time. It's going to be really hard sometimes. And then additionally, just the privacy of his family. He didn't want his kids exposed to all of that. So he pretty easily passed on it.
I know that I'm not supposed to like feel this way, but that's just awesome. I mean, that's a young guy, because he's so mature for being so young, but a young guy just being like, no, easy choice. I don't want to mess with that. I mean, the glitz and the glam and all that is what is appealing to so many players. And that decision-making process makes me feel like, all right, this is why the organization loves Lowry, why this fan base loves Lowry. Another example.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of decisions that Lowry has made that, you know, I think can lead you to respecting his maturity at even such a young age. And you don't have to go too far back. The decision to sign the extension with the Jazz, signing a long-term extension, letting them know that even though he is this great of a player and he has not been to the playoffs, and signing up with the Jazz long-term means that might be put on the back burner for even a couple of more years. He wants that because he loves it here. His family is happy, and he really believes that the Jazz are on the right path, and he likes the way that they're doing things. He likes Will Hardy. He's appreciative and wanted to show him loyalty after Will Hardy kind of gave him the opportunity to open up his game more. So there's that decision-making process. Also, the decision to sign that extension on August 7th, which guarantees that he doesn't have to worry about being traded all season. It gives him a sense of security. And then, you know, you can go even farther back than that with Lowry. Like, he's made a lot of decisions in his career that he's very endearing as a fan, I think.
Our last thing before I let you go, I know you're a big Jordan Clarkson fan. A lot of people are, for very good reason. What is his greatest value to this team? Is it as a trade asset in the future, or is it as someone who can help these young guys learn how to play the game the right way and win for the long-term rebuild project?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's probably a lot of people that would say, like, oh, if you want to learn how to play the right way, like, Jordan is not the first name that comes to mind, right? But I would disagree there, because Jordan Clarkson's career has been, at every step of the way, just him doing exactly what he's been asked to do. Like, what does the team need from you? Then you'll do exactly that. You know, like, I talked to him a lot in his first couple of years here about, you know, the reputation that he had of just being a gunner. Just go shoot the ball, let it fly whenever you want, don't think about anything else. And he's like, well, you know, when the coaches are telling you, like, go out there and take shots, I go out there and take shots. And if you're just asked to shoot, that's what you do. And then he comes, and under Quinn Snyder's tutelage, Quinn says you can take any shot you want as long as it's not the mid-range. And that's what he did. And he had the best years of his career doing that. And then Will Hardy comes in and he says, you know, I want you to take those shots, but also I need you to be able to set up some of these young guys. And I need Lowry to be put in a good position. I need, you know, Keontae and Colin, I need you to be able to play with these guys and set them up. And so then his assists shoot up. He has had more assists than he had in his career before that point. And so he does exactly what he's asked to do. And then I think that yesterday during media day, there was a little bit of a different tone with Jordan, in which he was really, really accepting, and it felt like it meant a lot to him to be a part of teaching this next, like, young wave of Jazz players. And he really, really takes that to heart. And even mentioning at a point yesterday that sometimes when he's on the floor, he knows that Keontae wants to do the right thing and pass him the ball if he's open for a shot. But there's going to be times this season where Jordan is going to want to look at Keontae and be like, no, man, you have a good shot. You need to wave me off and keep the ball. And so we're looking at a Jordan Clarkson who wants to be waved off so that Keontae George can take a shot. And so I think that's a much different attitude, and just proof again that every time he's been asked to do something, he does it. And I think that's a really good lesson for these young players.
Sarah, appreciate your time and your perspective today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Sarah Todd at NBA Sarah on Twitter, Jazz beat writer over at the Deseret News. Great stuff from Sarah. All right, back to the conversation about great athletes with a complicated legacy. 877-353-0700 on the Dish Pros text line. Let me know who fits that bill for you. Someone who is a great player or athlete, but the legacy gets complicated probably because of things that had nothing to do with actual competition. Speaking of competition, I feel like I took a loss last night, Alonzo, that I was very optimistic. I got overly optimistic of what Tyler Huntley was going to be able to do with his fantasy points. And Underdog Fantasy is the new way that I'm engaging with the NFL, and I'm going to do it with the UFC card that's coming this weekend. All of them are available on Underdog Fantasy and their mobile app. You can sign up with the promo code OC Show, and they're going to give you a free pick to use in your first cash pick'em, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. UnderdogFantasy.com. It's pretty simple. You could play live. You could make your higher or lower predictions in the moment, even after these games kick off, even after fights start. And I got overly optimistic, and I put higher on Snoop, Tyler Huntley being higher than 200 yards of offense in that game against the Titans. And
what did he have?
It did not play out that way.
Tough.
He had less than. But you know what? We're strong. Because you can stack your predictions on top of one another for big-time multipliers, and Underdog Fantasy is always giving you incentive and free or bonus type pick'ems. So, OC Show. That's your promo code. Sign up at UnderdogFantasy.com. I didn't play well last night, but I'm optimistic that I will improve in the future.
Tomorrow's a new day. OC, tomorrow is a new day.
All right. Complicated legacies for great athletes. We'll talk about it next on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700. Check, check, check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Can you hear me? Am I going through? Hello, hello, hello. Talking again. Hello, 1, 2, 3, 4. Talking. Battle of the Giants, Saturday, October 19th, live on ESPN Plus and DAZN. Battle of the Giants, Saturday, October 19th at 4 Eastern, live on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. Battle of the Giants, Saturday, October 19th at 4 p.m. Eastern, live on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. Battle of the Giants, Saturday, October 19th at 9 p.m. BST, live on DAZN. Battle of the Giants prelims, Saturday, October 19th at 8:30 p.m., live on NBC. Battle of the Giants, Saturday, October 19th, live on Stan. Battle of the Giants, Saturday, October 19th, live on ESPN Plus and DAZN. Do we need to call Jeff here? Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700. Some great responses on my question of athletes with complicated legacies. Great athletes with complicated legacies in respect to the passing of Pete Rose, who will be thought of as one of the greats all time, especially at the plate in baseball, but also as the betting cheat, as a guy who broke the rules in wagering on baseball and violated the sanctity of the sport by betting. Look, it feels crazy, especially now, because of of what is legal in the sports world. Sports wagering is not just legal, it is commonplace. It is requisite content for you to be creating at this point if you're in sports media. If you want to be talking about baseball, football, basketball, you have to at least have some knowledge of what the line on a game is. And companies are sponsoring teams, leagues are drawing millions and millions and millions of dollars of revenue off of legalized sports gambling. And unfortunately for Pete Rose and his legacy, he was involved in the betting world when it was still faux pas. So it begged the question for me, who are other great athletes who have complicated legacies? And I've got some great responses. Dennis Rodman and Michael Jordan have come in several times. Mark McGwire from 4801. Mark McGwire he was my brother's favorite baseball player growing up. Complicated legacy with the doping situation, with the steroid era. Jose Canseco, Roger Clemens, any assortment of baseball players who were involved in that, and Barry Bonds being the number one guy.
Alex Rodriguez,
a great example. I mean, there's just so many of them from that era of baseball that had complicated legacies associated with PED use. Lance Armstrong came in many times. Lance Armstrong is really, really fascinating to me because he was a liar, an aggressive liar during that whole thing. And he got found out and disgraced because of it. But at the end of the day, he also raised like a couple $100 million for cancer research.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, well.
Another guy, Jose Canseco.
Yeah, Jose Canseco for sure. He's got a lot of complicated things. He's got skeletons in the closet all over the place, Jose Canseco.
Oscar De La Hoya.
Oscar De La Hoya is very complicated as an athlete. His legacy also now tainted in some ways by his role as a promoter.
Yeah.
Because newsflash, kids, boxing promoters, generally not really upstanding individuals. And whatever your goal is, whatever your hope is when you get into that world, you're probably going to end up doing some slimy business deals.
CC Don King.
No complication on that legacy. We all know what Don King is and was. And look, I brought it up early in the show because also yesterday Dikembe Mutombo passed away, and his legacy is simple. You could write the story of Dikembe Mutombo's legacy on one line in crayon, on construction paper. And I'm saying all of those things as a compliment because as far as we know, there's no skeleton in the closet. There's no mess behind the masses. It's just Dikembe Mutombo was a smiling face with an iconic voice, one of the great defensive players in NBA history, and a humanitarian, a philanthropist of the highest order. So complicated legacies are a thing in sports, and I don't want one. Like, maybe you're more remembered. Maybe you're a better conversation point on this show because of it. If I'm an athlete, I want a legacy. Everybody who's ever come in contact with you has a positive story. You're a legend. You're awesome. Everyone, what I want the legacy to be. I have no hope of achieving such a thing, but that's the hope.
I'll plant this seed for when we come back to revisit this. Jerry Jones.
I actually think his legacy is fairly uncomplicated.
I think it's uncomplicated, but it is and it isn't, I guess, if that makes sense.
Well, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
We'll get deeper into it. This conversation is going to kind of run all the way through the show today, I think. We brought on a new partner for the Sean O'Connell Show several weeks back, and the results for all of us here who've been using Farmer and Chemist products have been phenomenal. Alonzo recovering from a little bit of a surgery. I made the mistake of going and grappling at the gym last night. My lower back, which is consistently a problem, became problematic again. Good thing I have problem salved, the lavender-scented balm from Farmer and Chemist. Jeff joins us to talk about the full line of products. Oh, Doug's with us. Doug joins us to talk about the full lineup of products at Farmer and Chemist. Hey, Doug.
Sean, good to be with you, and I'm glad you're feeling better after the lavender problem solved.
And smelling better, actually, which is a bonus, especially for someone like me.
Well, the reason it's working for you, it's a topical application of CBD, CBG, which is an amazing anti-inflammatory, and just a little bit of THC to help make sure that the CBD and the CBG get into the skin and help relieve the muscles and the joints that are causing the pain that's due to inflammation. So we're solving the problem of inflammation with our problem-solved topical CBD, CBG product.
Now, I know there are people out there who are new to the CBD product world and new to this world in general who say, wait a second, THC, I didn't know I was going to have to deal with THC. When we talk about THC being present in these products, what kind of concentration, what amounts are we talking about?
Well, that's an awesome question. So if you think THC, most people think, of course, marijuana, and they're going to have to go to a pharmacy and talk to their doctor and get a card. That is true, but that's not what Farmer and Chemist has. Our concentrations of THC, and I should say we have products that are THC-free, zero THC. You can pass a drug test. You'll never test positive because there's absolutely none in there. And then we have products with THC in them. And they're all legal for sale over the counter to adults because we have less than 0.3% THC. So that means, like for our gummies, each gummy has 4 milligrams of THC plus 5 milligrams of like CBG to help with inflammation, so it's kind of like problem solved, and 35 milligrams of CBD. So it's densely packed with cannabinoids that will not get you addicted. They're totally safe to relieve inflammation. And best used, I got to say, though, because of the THC in the evening, just until you know what happens when you take a product containing just a tiny amount of THC.
And by the way, if you're out there listening and you're like, I won't be able to tell which products have THC and which products don't have THC, that's why Farmer and Chemist is the answer for you, because all you have to do is go down to the store in Midvale or go online at farmerandchemist.com, and everything is very clearly labeled. It's very clear what you're getting yourself into, and the staff down there very, very knowledgeable about what products are probably going to be right for you, because it is pharmacist directed. You are doing it, for lack of a better term, Doug, the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Jeff earlier. We're both pharmacists. We designed these products to help people. And the team that's at the pharmacy, we're all trained up really well to help take the time to help people get the right medicine for the ailments that they have. And you're not going to be embarrassed slinking into the store. It's brightly lit. It's actually an old pharmacy that we've designed at 7719 South Main Street in Midvale, and it's amazing. The staff is great. Come in and visit us.
And mention ESPN 700, right?
Yes, whether online, you can use the promo code ESPN 700, or if you come into the store and talk to Jason and Ann and the rest of the crew and just let them know that you heard about Farmer and Chemist on ESPN 700 and from Sean, then you get a 20% discount.
Doug, hearing from you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Farmer and Chemist and farmerandchemist.com. All right. Gordy Chiesa is going to stop by. He's got a list for us. We're going to talk about the Utah Jazz. And you know what? Gordy's been around the NBA for a very long time, so I bet he has a good idea of someone who's a great athlete with a complicated legacy. Gordy Chiesa next on the Sean O'Connell Show. You're listening to ESPN 700. Alonzo, I know this is a flex that you're going to appreciate. I can sing along every word to this whole album. I know you're a big Will Smith, Big Willie style fan.
Big Willie style guy.
You're a big Willie style guy.
Big Willie style guy.
Yeah. Sean O'Connell Show on a Tuesday. Gordy Chiesa swings by to talk a little NBA basketball. Media days happening all over the league. Gordy, how are you?
Oh, see, I'm doing fine. Thank you. I agree with you. Let's get jiggy with it.
Let's get jiggy with it, indeed. I just came across one of my old friends from the Bay Area. Worked in media in the Bay Area. He's out covering Warriors training camp, and they're doing practices at BYU Hawaii, which is just absolutely phenomenal. What a great place to be out there and start ramping up practices in a season. What's the coolest place you ever attended a training camp, ran a training camp, ran basketball practices, Gordy?
Well, the first thing, the reason why teams go away is because of bonding. That they want to have the team and the players trying to make the team bond, and that's the reason why teams do it. Even though most facilities are tremendous as far as at the home arena, is that they go away purposely. In Jazz basketball, we used to go away to Boise State. And so my memory bank of going to Boise State is bonding with all the team members, but also, Sean, that incredible blue turf right in front of us. So the bus would park right in front of the football stadium, going into the arena, and all the guys who sometimes would be playing touch football on the bluegrass.
That's awesome.
Bluegrass. So I'm all for it. So, example, Knickerbockers go to College of Charleston. You mentioned before about the Golden State Warriors. They go to BYU Hawaii. So I am for it. It's an extra expense for the team, but it's absolutely well worth it as far as, again, bonding as a unit, getting to know your new teammates and what are some of the dilemmas that they might have.
Media day for the Utah Jazz yesterday and for several other teams around the NBA as well. Anything coming out of media day that we should be paying super close attention to? I mean, I know that GMs, coaches, players, media obligations are not always their favorite, but this early in the cycle, they're usually smiling, excited. This time of year, everyone seems to be happy to be getting back to work, right? That's how it seems, at least.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, absolutely. So media day, just for the entry level of we're starting a new season, and that the players and management and ownership are absolutely ecstatic that they're going to start practicing. And do you realize, Sean, today's October 1st, to 3 weeks from today is the opening day of the NBA. So it's only 3 weeks from now you get your first game. The Jazz play the next day on the 22nd. So the players are, I call it, Sean, boldly optimistic about this season. And they have to be, because everyone thinks they're going to play tremendously during the year, and by the way, we're going to be champions. That's what you have to think as a professional athlete, but we know the reality is going to set in come the dog days of February and March, where you're on a 6-game losing streak.
Well, it's interesting. That mentality is pervasive for athletes, as you mentioned, but also these guys are smart, and fans, that this team itself has to know that, the outlook for the Utah Jazz with this many young players on the roster is certainly not championship caliber if we're talking about any kind of likelihood here. So what's the focus as they head into this training camp, knowing that, we're going to try and win as many games as we can, but we're not going to win that many games?
Well, the focus right now is player development, but within that, though, you want to understand why you weren't successful last year. So, for example, in Jazz basketball, I'm sure they're going to work a tremendously amount of time also with accountability as far as defensively. The Jazz last year, unfortunately, were less in the NBA in overall defensive ranking. Less. Number 30. Pitcher being in the NFL, Sean, being ranked number 30 on overall defense. The Jazz, on the flip side, offensively committed the most turnovers in the NBA. Pitcher in the NFL, Sean, leading the NBA in most fumbles and interceptions. So the focus will be starting, I'm sure this morning already, is that protect the ball, and also how can we get the ball defensively as far as playing help with defense, and also rebounding the ball much better and getting it off the glass, and then to start ignite our fast break. So that should be the emphasis. So every drill should be part of that, and accountability of the players. So, for example, Sean, in practice to have 3 straight turnovers. Not to think it's not going to happen in a game if you don't correct it. is really being naive. So you've got to correct it. Sometimes light-handed, sometimes heavy-handed.
So we got a report from Media Day that Lauri Markkanen had been given an opportunity to show up on this Starting Five show on Netflix, and that apparently it wasn't even a hard decision for him, but he turned it down. He just said, no, everything's good right now, but when we start losing games and I don't want cameras around my family all the time, and it, the reasoning behind him turning it down seems to be coming from a very mature place and a very team-centered and family-centered place. And I'm impressed by that, because there's a lot of guys in pro sports, a lot of guys in any walk of life who are just trying to get as much money as they can, as much attention as they can. And it seems pretty clear that that's not where Lauri Markkanen's priorities are. How does that translate to his role in this organization?
Very much. It translates that, by the way, I'm a team player, and that I want what's best for the organization, and the extra amount of dollars that I might get for this isn't worth as far as in the big picture with my teammates. Remember now, part B of that, Larry Markkanen has signed a 4-year contract, Sean, for $195.8 million. So money is not an issue, to say the least. He's going to make this year $42.1 million. So the Jazz rewarded him with a tremendous contract and well-deserved, and he's saying that I'm all in as far as helping his team be the best that they can be with the young guys on our team. I find it very fascinating. The Jazz are going to try to thread this needle of player development, but some of the mid-tier veterans, by the way, we want to win, and that'd be Larry Markkanen. So we'll find out how they do it. Sure, next part of this is, by the way, the competition not going to cooperate. That the Western Conference is absolutely loaded. I keep thinking about the San Antonio Spurs with Victor Wembanyama. They won 22 games last year, and he played tremendous. And so can the Spurs make that growth? Can John Morant come back from the Grizzlies after a self-inflicted things that happened to him last year? Can the Grizzlies get better? They won 55 games the year before. They won 27 last year. Then can the Pelicans grow? Can the Suns can the Suns grow with their big three? Can they get better as far as being injury-free? And there's always top of the apex, the Thunder, the Nuggets, the T-Wolves now, who made that tremendous trade as far as with Karl Anthony Towns going to Knickerbockers, and then the T-Wolves as far as what they're going to do, as far as how they perceive what they got back in the Julius Randle and also in Dante DiVincenzo. So the T-Wolves will be a factor in the West. That's who the Jazz play against, so it's going to be interesting.
Getting back to the Spurs, I read a report that Victor Wembanyama has added 20 pounds to his very stretched-out frame. How much is strength and size going to help him as he enters his second year in the NBA?
It's paramount, Sean. Like any business, it's a balance. So a lot of times in sports, you're going to get knocked off balance because of the velocity of the hit. Whether it's boxing, whether it's the NFL football, whether it's basketball, crashing the boards, going for the rebound. And so the players that have a better sense of balance, which means that both lower body and upper body strength. And so by adding Wembanyama 20 pounds or so, it's going to help him when he gets bumped off stride, which is perfectly normal. Also in Jazz basketball, that was the Taylor Hendricks also put on 20 pounds. And so when you drive to the basket and you get hit, no foul called, you're able to make a play through contact, and that's any sport. The ability to make a play through physicality separates so many players. I just described to the ultimate LeBron James. When he drives to the basket, is that people bounce off him defensively instead of him being off balance, they're off balance. So Wembanyama and also Taylor Hendricks and all the other young guys, strength is a factor, and it's how you use it.
It's funny because when you say somebody adds 20 pounds, I mean, if we're talking about that in football, you're talking about that in baseball. 20 pounds is usually incredibly noticeable. I mean, on a 6'4" frame, 20 pounds you can see. A lot of these guys who go 6'8+, it's hard to find those 20 pounds. But does it change, when you're coaching them? Do you worry about the cardio because now you gotta supply oxygen to those extra pounds and things like that? How is it handled when a guy gets on that weight training program and that nutrition program to add a little bit of mass in the off season?
Yeah, very much. We're concerned about it. And so the nutritionists are very conscious of doing that as far as what's the intake as far as calories and how many calories are burned off. Sean, in a regular basketball game, it's amazing how many calories are burnt off by the players. I've seen the guys on the plane at 2 o'clock in the morning eat ravishly, and the reason why they just lost X amount of thousands of calories they just lost playing in a game. So Wembanyama type, and generally speaking, the wear and tear of the season, often players that play all the time have a hard time keeping their weight on. And that's for most people in the real world, they'd be ecstatic keeping their weight off. In the NBA, for many guys, especially guys that are angular body with tall hips, that weight they're able to really distribute very well. The question is, can they keep it? Can they keep it on? When we had Thoroughbelly on our team, who now works for the Jazz, is a tremendous broadcaster analyst. We always talked about him. We hope he could gain weight during the season. He was the opposite. He kept on losing weight. The more he ate, it didn't matter because of his metabolism and also the energy that he gave as far as everything. So it's really a phenomena as far as happening. But, Sean, NBA basketball, there's nothing like it. There are so many subplots that are going on. You think you know the answer to some of them, but the reality is that you know very few of them because you're dealing with human behavior. So human behavior is this wonderful thing in sports that when you line up against someone on the court or on the football field or the baseball diamond, is that how you're going to respond to the physicality of the moment within the rules of the game with technique.
So we started the show today talking about Pete Rose's passing, and he's a great athlete with a complicated legacy because of the whole betting mess. And there's a lot of guys in the NBA. I put a question out: the greatest athlete with a complicated legacy. Michael Jordan's name has come in. Dennis Rodman's name has come in pretty frequently. Karl Malone, obviously, with the local interest here. You've been around the NBA a very long time. A great athlete whose legacy is complicated.
Well, I go one step further. Wasn't a great athlete, but we had him in Orlando. When I worked for the Orlando Magic as a full-time consultant, we had a guy on a team named Glenn Baby Davis, who had a complicated past also. He's always, getting in trouble at 3 o'clock in the morning for all the wrong reasons. And so reinforced my mind about, one, helping people. First thing, as coaches and people in management and ownership, you want to help the player get counseling of what he needs, but also you could help an organization by really being conscious of trying to get the best players on your team that you think are the most live in the real world as far as having an element of discipline within themselves, meaning self-discipline, but also respect authority of the people in charge. So it's an unbelievable balancing act that every team goes through. Yeah, most teams have an element of one or two players. Sean, I'll call them outlaws. But if you have more than one or two, or one, or even that, then it affects the group as far as what? Concentration.
Glenn Big Baby Davis, 40-month sentence for attempting to defraud the NBA's healthcare plan. So, that's a good example, Gordy. What's your list today?
Yeah, and there was other things that were going on, to say the least. This is a family show showing right now, so I'm not going to go into heavy detail right now.
I can appreciate
Sean,
that.
Speaking of a family show, I want to give some love out to some of the Jazz players before I interrupt the clock right now. Sean, this is my list today. The Utah Jazz franchise leaders in career-made three-point shots as a member of the Jazz.
Okay.
So the people driving right now on I-15, member of the Jazz only, not later on in the career. And Sean, here's the question to you, is that, and also for anyone else that's driving right now in the car, and also for Alonzo that's behind the scene right now, how far is the NBA three-point shot, Sean, from the corner? Corner three.
Oh, the corner one's the short one.
Yes.
How far is it, Gordy?
22 feet. 22 feet. And the arc extended line three, when you arc out, the NBA three-point arc three is 23 9 inches. And then for all the older people and older people aficionados, what about that thing called the ABA in yesteryear with that unbelievable red, white, and blue ball? How far was the ABA three? That was 25 feet across the floor.
Whoa.
With that, 25 feet. So we know that now. Steph Curry and those guys, they make rainbow threes from literally 28 feet. So that's how the evolution of the three-point shot. Here we go. The top 10 Jazz three-point shooters. Number 10, Darren Williams with 511 career. Number 9, Mehmet Okur, which nickname is called Money. He's the second best ever in Jazz history big man range shooter in franchise history, only behind, we mentioned earlier, Larry Markkinen. Larry Markkinen is the best three-point shooter in Jazz history, not career-wise yet, because he hasn't played many years yet, but if he stays there for a long time, he'll be number 1. Number 8, his nickname was Dr. Duncanstein. When he had a three-point shot, I used to call it a moon ball with an arcing three. So the ball is like a moon up in the air and it arc into the basket. That's no other than Darrell Griffin, who made 530. Number 7, Brian Russell, B-Russ, made career-wise 540. Number 6, Bojan Bogdanovic, made 550. Number 5 all-time Jazz three-point shooters, Gordon Hayward, made 689. Number 4, he plays for the Jazz as we speak right now with a total of 737 made triples. I'll call him Jordan Clarkson. I'll call him a wild-eye flamethrower. Think about Jordan Clarkson. He has the ball, and especially in the fourth quarter, he has wild eyes, where he's taking that three-point shot. Number 3, I wish he would have shot more of them, because when he shot him, it always went in. When a Jazz greatest players of all time, John Stockton, made 845 threes. And what's interesting about that, it wasn't even fashionable when he shot them. You know, the evolution of the three-point shot happened with Stephen Curry and that group about, say, 12 years ago. So Stockton made 845 for his career, not even thinking of 3. Number 2 all-time. Nickname was the Spider, Donovan Mitchell. He made 958 threes, and the number 1 shooter of all time as far as career-made threes in the Utah Jazz uniform is, I'll call him an Aussie with the golden arm or an Aussie with the swag. Joe Ingles made 1,071 career threes, and part of that, Sean, is that he shot from Korea for the Jazz from three-point range, 40.8 from threes.
Wow.
That's my list of the day. It's a huge factor as far as the ability to make threes, but also defensively to guard the three-point line.
I think in all my years of Little League basketball, rec league basketball, pickup game basketball, I've probably made a total of like 7 three-pointers. So this is just beyond insane to me. The guys have made a living doing it.
And Stephen Curry is the world's greatest shooter of all time. He's the all-time leader in made threes, and he'll get even more. And it just shows you the evolution of the game. So you've got to be able to make threes, especially open corner threes, which really distressing sometimes in an NBA game, especially in Jazz basketball, when the offense is playing well, they swing the ball around the floor for an open corner three, and for all the wrong reasons, that guy doesn't have his feet set, and he misses that open three. And that's demoralizing for the team that just passed the ball around perimeter or inside-outside. Post up, kick it back out for a three-point shot. You can't make it. So you've got to make the open threes, especially from the corners.
Gordy, you always educate us when you join us. I appreciate your time, my friend.
Thanks, Sean. Peace out. We'll talk on Thursday. Stay well.
Gordy Chiesa, NBA Insider, brought to you by Larry H. Miller Chevrolet. Get Chevy ready today. Better than employee pricing and a Solitude Season Pass with every vehicle purchased. Riley Nelson's going to join us for some Big 12 in our noon hour. That'll be brought to you by Mountland Supply. Go to mountlandsupply.com. Check out their new location. Riley Nelson to talk about the undefeated BYU Cougars next on ESPN 700. I started yesterday's show talking about how wrong we were about many things. And in doing so, I was trying to make Utah football fans feel better because we were so wrong about a lot. And a lot of folks are wrong right now about how doom and gloom you need to feel with the Utes after a loss to Arizona. We were very wrong. I don't know if we were more wrong about any team than we were about BYU. I was more optimistic than the rest of the media who picked them 13th in the preseason poll. I certainly did not have 5-0 at any point for BYU. I won't go that far and pretend I knew that this was coming, but that's the reality. That's where BYU's at, second highest ranked team in the Big 12 Conference right now. It has been incredibly impressive. Riley Nelson, BYU Insider, joins us here on the show to talk about that and much more. Riley, how are you?
Doing well. I mean, when you're, as you mentioned, as a BYU fan, when you're 5-0, you're kind of floating on air because you feel like you're playing with house money a little bit because I think even the most blue-goggled of Zoobs, if they're being honest, didn't think that we'd be here at this point.
Yeah, I mean, what has been the key to outperforming the expectations, even the most optimistic projections in your mind?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me is everybody undervalued the impact of or the step forward of Jay Hill from year 1 to year 2. Getting in there, getting his guys, kind of cleansing, the philosophy and defensive approach of the previous staff, and instilling his approach to defense, the attitude, and then also his guys. But the interesting thing about that is he's doing a lot of it with the same guys, like Jacob Robinson on the back end making plays, Tyler Batty, Mangleton, Nelson up front. Obviously the linebacking core is a bunch of new names, but I think that was the biggest aspect that people underestimated this BYU team because, in my opinion, the defense is leading the charge. They're providing the foundation, the springboard for this success, in my opinion.
So one of the big questions coming into the year was like, all right, what's the quarterback play going to look like? Didn't know if it was going to be Bohannon or if it was going to be Retzlaff. And obviously it's been Jake. In this last game, he was fine, I think. I mean, it wasn't like a transcendent performance, but a couple of touchdowns, couple of interceptions. He ran the ball well. Are you seeing week to week the improvement? Are we seeing the growth you need from the quarterback in order for this winning to be sustainable?
I think so. I also because I think if BYU, if they're going to try and repeat some of the success of this first, not quite half, right, but the first 5 games of the season and repeat it throughout, I think it's got to be done in the same manner, and that's with all 3 units contributing significantly. And so I think the offense has done that as long as they can not be too much of a distractor, which, you've had your moments where you're sitting there scratching your head, but that's going to happen with kind of any offense outside maybe a couple of the top tier elite. And I don't think there's any illusions that BYU's offense is elite by any means. And so you're going to have, drives or 3 or 4 drives in a game. And kind of what happened, there was a significant lull in the second half of that Baylor game after the super hot start. But that's what's going to happen with this team. Like, they're going to put up a flurry of 28 points in basically the first quarter and change. But then, it's going to regress to the mean, and you're going to have the performance in the second half that you had. So as long as you come into a game expecting that as a fan, I think this offense has enough juice to help BYU. I mean, it's crazy to even say this, but they are in the driver's seat, sitting atop the Big 12 at 5-0 and 2-0 in conference play. But this offense does have enough juice to help them compete for a spot in that conference championship game. Now, on its own, are they? No. As I said, this BYU team's going to have it be in 3 phases, but the offense meets the minimum standard to where at least I don't think they'll single-handedly hold this team back.
Talking BYU football, they are 5-0 with Riley Nelson here on the Sean O'Connell Show. So they're headed into a bye week. Utah's in a bye week. BYU's in a bye week. What should the priority be for this bye week and, the extra break, the rest period, et cetera, for BYU, for the staff? How are they handling it?
Yeah, you got to get your running back room back healthy, which they've already said, I think, in this last Monday's presser barring any significant setbacks or other accidents in practice. Excuse me. They fully expect the running back room to get back to full strength. They've had, luckily, nothing too catastrophic on defense, but make sure that defense is healthy. Get those guys re-energized. That's number one. But even bigger than kind of the health. So health is the first thing that I mentioned, but it's not actually the first thing in mind. The first thing in mind is like BYU. You mentioned pick 13th in the media polls. Kind of a similar thing happened in basketball. BYU is a lot better when kind of being written off or the underdog. Well, now they've got everyone's attention, and now people are gunning for them. Now, they've truly been, they were a road dog to Baylor. They were a home dog to Kansas State. They were a road dog to SMU. They've been able to kind of do that us against the world. Well, now the media is starting to come around to them. The fans are starting to come around to them, and now they've got that. They're the favorites. They're everybody's kind of sexy pick right now as a dark horse, and they're talking about contending from conference champs. So I think even bigger than that is the leadership of this team and the leadership of the coaches have to maintain that hunger, and however you do it, maybe Kalani can go back to that bag, that Kyle Whittingham bag when he was coaching with him for so many years. Kyle Whittingham has the best ability to convince his team that everyone is against them, despite the fact that everybody is actually for them, meaning favoring them in that. But you got to keep that hunger, because when BYU falls into this hype cycle of starting to feel themselves, historically, that's when we've seen the letdown. So you really keep the pedal down during this bye week. You got to get guys healthy, but psychologically, you got to keep the pedal down and keep that narrative strong that, despite being 5-0, they still don't believe us out there. They're all waiting for our downfall. They're waiting for us to trip up. So let's, stay locked in and prove everybody wrong.
Well, look, I can see why there's that pride cycle that's dangerous for every football team. I mean, there were a lot of Ute fans that felt like that was the problem with the Arizona game, that, you feel like it's a night game at Rice Eccles and all you got to do is roll your helmet out there and you're going to win because you've taken for granted your home dominance over the last, whatever it is, 6 years. And that obviously didn't play out that way. Aside from becoming overconfident, what is the greatest vulnerability or weakness on this BYU football team? Because that might be something to focus on as we look at these matchups after the bye week.
Inexperience in doing it week in, week out. I mean, Utah has that experience from being in the Pac-12, but and then the other thing that can be a potential weakness is the perception of things. So I like Utah underestimated Arizona, but for good reason. They only managed 7 points against Kansas State, and then they only scored 22 against Northern Illinois, who's an FCS team. But make no mistake, as we saw on full display, Noah Fafita is a certified baller, and he has a lot of weapons at his disposal, and he wasn't scared of that Utah front, and he extended plays, and that put stress on that back end of that defense who was trying to hold in man coverage, right, and was able to do it. BYU. Now, I will say that the last probably 4 years of independence, they had schedules that were a little bit more of a gauntlet, but still, it's not going to compare to the gauntlet of a Big 12. So bring it week in, week out, despite now they're going to be on full alert for Arizona because they just, as you pointed out, they just watched Arizona, right, who's their next opponent, beat Utah at Utah at night, which two teams have done in the past 25 years, right? So they're going to be on high alert there. But, maybe you were going to get hyped up for that UCF game. You're like, we got to go to Orlando. They got this big offense. You go and you watch Colorado go down and handle their business there. Each game is each game. What you can't become susceptible to is allowing your emotions or your perspective of your next opponent be swayed by their performance in the previous week, because this is a P4 conference. Everybody's talented. Everybody's good. In a lot of ways, it's similar to the NFL, where from week to week you see teams beat up on teams that you never saw, and you see teams lose or get beaten up by teams that you would have never guessed. Who had the Broncos beating the Jets? At home or on the road, beating the Jets in New Jersey this last week. Almost no one did, yet it happened. So BYU has to show that maturity, and they have to show that respect for P4 level football to bring it week in, week out, and not be lulled to sleep because, a team put a lackluster performance on film the game prior.
Well, to that point, I've watched a lot of this Big 12, and my darkest fears have been realized that my concern was Utah was going to leave the Pac-12 conference, which was always cannibalizing itself and which had a lot of parity where, Arizona State can beat Oregon and all this stuff. And it's the same thing in the Big 12 conference. So as we are 5 weeks in, BYU 5-0, Utah 4-1, a bunch of teams, I think, clustered in that, hey, we could probably beat you kind of category. Who is great right now? Who in the Big 12 do you think is the best football team in the Big 12 through these 5 weeks?
Yeah, good question. I mean, here's the thing about Utah and others. Well, here's what I'll say. Like, Kansas State, in large part, has no big misses, right? So, like, Lavelle Edwards Stadium and BYU handled business despite them being favored in a lot. A lot of people had a lot of respect for Oklahoma State, but like they've trotted out Bowman since the beginning, and they've got Ollie Gordon still out there, and they're not missing any significant like receiver contributor. I don't know the defenses as well as I should to know like who's missing or that, but I was going to say, so it's probably safe to say that Oklahoma State and Kansas State, because they haven't experienced a significant loss at any key position, probably weren't as good as people thought they were. The one caveat with Utah is like they're lying in wait. Obviously, you've had a true freshman, Isaac Wilson, kind of come out and had to cut his teeth, and I don't think he's definitely not wholly to blame, but you do wonder if you've got your seventh-year senior in there kind of commanding the huddle and kind of managing the game, if the outcome of last night's game might be a little bit different, and if your performances aren't a little bit more efficient, than they have been with a player who's kind of learning on the fly. Colorado, I think everybody's expecting them to do the same thing that they did last year, which is start off hot and then fade, but they're giving indications. So they're starting to run the ball. It's not all trying to be the Shedeur Sanders show and just let him run around. They're actually running good offense. They're playing good defense. They've got Travis Hunter, who's a legitimate, Heisman contender player, making plays on both sides of the ball. So you got Colorado kind of laying in wait, but they're a sneaky one. Like, they're a trap for me because everybody's waiting for them to implode just like they did last year, where I think they started off 4-1 and then they didn't even make a bowl game. They finished off 1-7 or whatever they did. Beyond that, and then the one team, of course, and this is going to be the team that's going to end up winning the conference simply because they are an afterthought to everybody, despite being a really solid program who's performed really well. You got Iowa State, who's kind of out there, and they're the Cyclones, and they kind of play a boring brand of football. Most people associate them more with the Big Ten maybe than they do with the Big 12. But those guys play great defense. They run the football and, are just as solid as can be. So who's great? I don't know that anybody's great at this point. Like, Utah's going to have to earn it back that they're great with Cam Rising, simply because we haven't seen enough sample size with him to know. And then, Iowa State. And then without being blue goggled, I think BYU being a double-digit dog on the road to SMU, being a home dog, almost, a more than a touchdown home dog to Kansas State, and then, kind of exercising their morning game or their 10 a.m. or noon Eastern kick demons against Baylor. To me, it's kind of a three-horse race. Iowa State, Utah, BYU, and then I'd still probably throw Colorado in there, just because I think while they're in the same spot they were last year, I think they've gotten there differently, and I think they're showing a little bit more substance in their program.
Yeah, I think Colorado is more dangerous than people are giving them credit for. They have some of the same problems they had last year, but they have the best player in all of college football, and they have a quarterback who knows exactly what he's doing. And before I let you go, I wanted to get your thoughts on the situation that has developed around Cam Rising here at the University of Utah. It's a really difficult scenario for everyone to be involved in. We know what happened last year. Nobody expected that he'd be 3.5 quarters into a season after 5 games in 2024. But that's just the way that it's worked out. And if I could show you some of the group threads, man, like, the bandwagon is starting to empty out, and there are people questioning toughness. And we're not doing that on this show. It's a legitimate injury, and you know better than I do how having something on your throwing hand can really bother you. But as this team heads into a bye week and a get-right week where it feels like unless we're being lied to outright, there should be no reason we don't see Cam Rising against Arizona State after this is all said and done. Just your thoughts at the quarterback position, how difficult it is to come in when your team has been without you, and what is Cam Rising facing?
Well, Sean, you said unless we're being flat out lied to me that is the only explanation. Like a minor laceration of the hand should not be. That is 7 to 10 days.
Well, it's not a laceration that's the concern. I know that for a fact, and I'm not going to violate the injury policy and lose my credential by giving information that is not public. But I know it's not a cut. So
then a finger dislocation or something like but that's the thing. Like the fans are being straight up lied to. As long as they're. But here's the thing that I don't know that anybody in the building's getting anything more unless they just have airtight media training, because if you got to imagine what the players do in press, if they knew, the players when they do press seem to be truly in the dark as to the status of Cam, and that is a major distraction, and that's detrimental. So you talk about a quarterback coming back, that is hard. So I'll give my own little personal experience, right? I break my transverse process in my low back my senior year. We try and keep it. It happens against Weber State. We're playing Utah the next week. It happens. We keep it under wraps. We don't tell my teammates. I go out there and try and practice. I end up going out and playing, and then the next week against Boise. But as I'm trying to play through it, the thing's getting better. I'm getting stiffer. Pain's getting worse. All of this stuff. So going into Boise and my week of practice looked different, all that stuff. And I finally had to go in and look, I know we're trying to play coy and we're not trying to divulge injuries, but I have to at least tell my offense. So we had a players meeting going into that Boise game to where I told these guys, I put my x-ray up on the board. I showed them here's what I'm dealing with. We need to step, we need you to step up and we need to do our thing. And anyway, close loss to Utah, close loss to Boise State. And then, finally sat me down and we put in Taysom, and Taysom runs for 12 yards a carry, and everything was great. And we probably should have done it sooner. But regardless, it was extremely confusing for my teammates to be left in the dark during those 2 weeks where they knew I was hurt, but they didn't know exactly what the injury was nor the extent. And things just got a lot clearer for our entire offense and team when there was transparency between those walls. And I don't know I don't know if or not that's happening at Utah. But if those players are being kept in the dark, it's going to be exponentially more difficult for Rising to come back without there being some disclosure of transparency as to why the heck this dude isn't playing, and suiting up out there with us.
That's why I wanted to ask a quarterback this question, and a quarterback that I know who dealt with some injuries. And I appreciate that insight. It's food for thought at the very, very least. And we've talked about it in every different angle, but I think this is a major inflection point for Utah football, the bye week, and of course the game after the bye week. And we'll just see how it plays out. But for now, 2 top 25 teams in the state of Utah, BYU and Utah, as we get closer and closer to a holy war that is once again a conference game. We'll keep doing red and blue here on the Sean O'Connell Show. And Riley, appreciate your time very much.
I love it. Great to be with you, OC.
Great stuff. Great, valuable insight on maybe how the different policies, the different philosophies on handling a quarterback injury can affect the player individually and the team on the larger scale. Appreciate that perspective from Riley Nelson. Always great stuff from him. All right, that means we got a short one to end the hour. I'll give you a couple of Big 12 numbers as we are in the noon hour, and Big 12 at noon is always brought to you by Mountain Land Supply. Big 12 by the numbers, including, I keep calling him the best player in college football, Travis Hunter, has some stupid numbers. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700. I think has some vulnerability still on their lines.
Right.
They've started to disguise those pretty well. They've started to believe in what's happening there. The wild roller coaster of belief with Coach Prime at the helm is really fascinating to watch. So I have no idea what they're going to end up being. They might have won their last game of the year, or they might win, 5 out of the remaining.
What's a crime is that he's not going to win the Heisman.
I think he might.
I don't know if they give it to him, though.
I think he might. Jalen Milroe has something to say about that after an insane performance against Georgia. Like, that's a long time, though, for people to remember your Heisman moment. If he just has, like, a good year moving forward and not an unbelievable year, I'm talking about Milroe. That's the Heisman moment for him. And that if it happens in week 4 or 5, that's a little premature for the Heisman voter who doesn't think or remember anything.
Right.
They're most voters are very irresponsible. Too many people have votes. But Ashton Genty and Travis Hunter are now in the top 5 for Heisman odds to win the Heisman this year. And those guys were well outside of the conversation when the year began. So something to keep an eye on. I have another question for you before we get to a break, and Jeff Schwartz joins us on the other side.
Okay.
I just saw Cole Bagley tweeted out the hat wall for the Utah Hockey Club. It's one of the great things when you go into a team store and you walk up and there's the hat wall, and you're just like, oh, look at these incredible options. And there's already some really good ones for the Utah Hockey Club. Merch is only going to get better, and even better, I think, once the team actually has a name. But I put the poll out at Real OC Sports on Twitter. What is the most essential for you, Alonzo? The most essential piece of wear or gear to support your team? Is it the ball cap? Is it the T-shirt? Is it the actual jersey or sweater or whatever? Or is it like outerwear, jacket, hoodie, sweatshirt, whatever?
So, I mean, obviously, number one, what one of them is. It's hat.
For you, I assumed your answer was going to be the cap because you're always wearing a hat.
And number 2 would be a hoodie.
Yeah. That you just described your wardrobe every single day.
Pretty much. I mean, listen, I haven't paid for any clothing in a very long time, and if Utah Hockey Club wants to send us some hats, I will gladly wear a hat. The hat of the day today is the old school Salt Lake Gulls hat.
It's a great hat.
Great hat.
It's a phenomenal hat.
Low key hoping when Salt Lake inevitably gets that major league team. Yeah, I said it. I hope they're just called the Salt Lake Gulls.
I hope that they are the Salt Lake Cutthroats and they use the Gulls color scheme.
That actually would be solid too.
That's what I'm hoping for.
Throwing fish on the field.
Yeah. Anytime someone hits a home run, grand slam, no hitter, just a bunch of stanky cutthroats.
Yeet. Like in Seattle, right? Like at the market where you're just in the dugout. That's the celebration.
Yeah, the Pike Place. There's a
you just flung a cutthroat at each other.
You just to clean it up, you would just have to have cats in the ballpark
at all times.
That you just let them out and they go eat it, and then you're good.
Or if we're in Utah, right? Just have like a mountain lion.
Who was it? What hockey team that people used to throw octopus on the ice?
Oh yeah, that's right.
It was someone. It was like Detroit or so. It was like someone that didn't make sense.
Yeah, I think it was either like Detroit or like the Blues or something like that, or was it the Stars?
But it was like, why are you? First of all, that's an expensive thing to throw around. Also, after watching that My Octopus Teacher documentary, can't eat octopus anymore. Don't want to see them get killed and thrown onto the ice. They're smarter than I am.
Oh no, they're terrible. They're geniuses.
It's freaky.
Yeah. But also, the question I had when that happened, how did you get that into the stadium or the arena? I'm sorry.
Dude, where are you smuggling that octopus?
Yeah, and I think that's where the question stops because I don't want to know.
You know what? I know this. An octopus can fit through an orifice as long as that orifice is at least as large as its mouth, its beak.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah, that's horrible.
Like, they are the supervillains.
We took that down the wrong path.
Yeah, we did. We went down the wrong road.
I don't feel like that was a good thing to do.
No.
All right, hour 3 coming. Jeff Schwartz is going to join us.
Cap and hoodie, back just to bring it back.
All right. The poll question answer for Alonzo is actually 2 of the available answers. He wants the cap and the hoodie. If you have to choose one,
cap,
the ball cap
all day.
Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700. Hey, what? Friday. Yeah, Friday we could probably do. Jeff Short's going to join us here in just a minute. Talk some NFL, some college football. Just get a big old handful of those cheesy potatoes, probably some cornflakes crusted on top, and just
I was thinking
hard to clean up though. You clog up the Zamboni, would not be a good situation.
Thinking a Beto's breakfast burrito.
No, you can't. No, you're not throwing breakfast burritos.
A Crown Burger.
It has to be quintessentially Utah. Ooh, Crown Burger. Other players would be like, "Is there pastrami on top of that burger?
What is that sauce?
What is that? What is that pinkish sauce? What is that? That's
Try
not
it.
a bad idea."
Lick it up off the ground. Try it.
Just have NHL players who spent all their lives and time in Canada being like, "What's this, eh?" Be awesome.
A swig.
Just a styrofoam cup of a giant one of soda,
100 ounces,
with a bunch of flavored syrups in it.
Like as you've seen around the studio here, recall the big ass mugs. Just get a big ass mug and throw it.
Just everyone getting so confused about what's going on.
Yes.
Green Jell-O would be awesome. That'd probably be the easiest one.
Yeah, green Jell-O's, and you could smuggle that in pretty easy.
You get the little snack pack Jell-O cups. Just make sure it's green. You throw it on the ice. It's not in the team's color scheme, so that might confuse some people. We got to figure out something, though. While it's Utah Hockey Club, you got to figure out something. And then when it's the Yeti, you got to figure out something else. I don't know what you have to figure out when they turn their name into the Yeti, but you got to figure out something else. All right, Sean O'Connell Show on a Tuesday. I got a couple questions out on the poll. The best/most essential piece of team wear to have to show your allegiance to a team: ball cap, T-shirt, jersey or sweater, hoodie, jacket, or outerwear. Right now, ball cap is number one. 45% of the votes coming in on the ball cap. T-shirt is in second place. Hoodie, jacket, or outerwear is in third place. The jersey or sweater, people are out on jerseys these days, man. Surprises me somewhat. I also posed the question in respect to Pete Rose passing. Who is the greatest athlete with a complicated legacy? We got some excellent answers early in the show. 877-353-0700 or at Real OC Sports. If you weren't listening then, I'd love for you to tell me who's the greatest athlete with a complicated legacy. And then the other poll question, should Pete Rose be posthumously inducted to the Baseball Hall of Fame?
Yes.
74% of the votes say yes, he should. Jeff Schwartz joins us now to talk all things in the sporting world. Jeff, how are you?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Jeff here is in North Carolina, for people who don't know. He's in Charlotte, and thankfully Charlotte has not been washed away from the surface of the planet yet. So glad things are okay in Charlotte.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, Sean. We get the devastation. I was just watching some drone footage of the mountains right now in Western Carolina and a little bit north of us, and the damage is just a 1,000-year flood event. Katrina level damage. It's pretty wild. The places that we joked for many years about my mountain trip that I would take in October, and how you mocked me. We probably even talked about in this show for the calling 2,000-foot elevation in the mountains, but the place we stayed at just like washed off the face of the planet. Just the river took it, and that's the end of it. So and I think what makes this unique is there's just no cell service up there anyways. We used to do shows. Remember on Friday during the season from that place? I couldn't even. It was basically you just did a show for 3 hours because there was no reception for me to do the show. There was no internet. So it's very unfortunate. If you're a giving person, there's plenty of places I think to give, and just water and kids, baby supplies. I mean, all those things are so needed in that region.
Yeah, plenty of places to donate. Consider doing so, because it is an apocalyptic event for folks that live in Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee and some of those places. So pretty crazy stuff. Thankfully, Jeff and the family are safe, and we are able to engage with the college football weekend. I'll start with, I know that you paid attention to the late game. You always stay up into, 2 o'clock in the morning to watch your Utes. But Utah, they just laid the egg against the University of Arizona. We've got a bye week now for them to process and hopefully get Cam Rising healthy and things like that. But I'm not overly surprised that there was a a stubbing of the toe. There was a down week. I thought that this Arizona team was dangerous. I didn't think it would look the way that it did, but just your thoughts on that Utah loss to Arizona.
Well, it was red zone failures, right? Because I think I tweeted this out. They got into the 10-yard line and no points, 7-yard line, no points. And then finally at the 5, I think they got 3 points the last time. The third time they went in the first 3 trips. And I think, when you have the young quarterback at home, maybe just take the points early on, right, Sean, to feel good about some drives that you have with a young quarterback playing a team like Arizona. I'm not going to fault aggression, but in certain situations, I think the points are probably good. And I just, this is, I think, the problem when you play with a young backup is it's not going to look the same. It's not going to be consistent. It's not going to be as good as with Cam Rising. And who knows? I mean, will Cam play in 2 weeks? Sean, I sent you that tweet yesterday, and you didn't heart the tweet, the DeMar Hamlin one, which I thought was funny. Is Cam going to play again? What's the deal, man?
Look, I think that Cam is dealing with a hand injury that is more severe than people thought. Kind of like,
just be honest about it.
I don't disagree with that, Jeff. I think that you've gotten to. I understand the injury policy in a lot of situations. I don't understand it in this one, where you dealt with this for an entire season last year, and the narrative was confusing and the narrative was complicated, and ultimately it took until like the straw broke the camel's back and Cam Rising came on these airwaves and was like, you guys don't realize how bad this thing was. Nobody knew the full extent of it. This is how it was, and that's why I'm not back. That's why I didn't play. And everyone's like, okay. And once they got the explanation, there was some level of understanding, and it reduced the anxiety and the upset over the whole thing. And now this year, there are a lot of people operating under the incorrect assumption, that Cam has now missed 2 weeks because he got a cut. He got a boo-boo on his finger. That's not what's keeping him out, but the narrative is not being controlled by just transparency and saying, here's what the injury actually was. Here's the timeline on the recovery. Now that we're in the bye week, we think he'll be back after this bye week, whatever. I guess there's a higher priority placed on secrecy than on clarity for your team and your fan base. And I'm not necessarily supportive of that, but that's just what the policy has been, and no one's going to move Kyle Whittingham off that spot.
Well, I get that's what the policy has been, but like it's your point. Like if you just said, "Hey, man, Cam Rising has a dislocated finger and it's really swollen, and he has a laceration, and it's just taking time to heal, and we have Wilson here for a reason. We think he can play. We can play with without Cam through the bye week, and this is what our plan is." Everyone would be like, "Okay, cool." Like, and I think it's just, I don't know if Cam Rising's practice stats from last week. I didn't pay attention as much as I did the week before. But it's also tough on the team, right, Sean? Where the team might know more than we know what his status is. It's certainly fair. But when you have, let's say he is practicing a little bit, there's a little bit of like, okay, well, is he going to play for us? And I can understand the deflation when he's not going to play for you when he's practiced during the week. Like that, it's hard as a player to keep having that happen. It didn't happen last year, obviously, but it did happen 2 weeks ago, right? And they won the game at Oklahoma State. It was a great win for Utah. And heading in this week, I would imagine the players might have thought Cam. This is speculation, of course, but like Cam's coming back. He's coming back. Like we got our guy back. We won the game. We stole the game, right? On the road, ranked opponent, true freshman quarterback. Like things we've talked about. Can't win road games against ranked teams. Like they did all the things that you shouldn't do in that game, and they won the game, right? Like they won a great game at Oklahoma State. And imagine that, without the clarity of Cam's not playing, I can understand the deflation of him not playing on Saturday on the team.
We'll find out, I imagine, right at kickoff, whether he's going to play against Arizona State. I think is probably when we'll know the status on that one. And that's just fine. I've accepted it. I understand why people are upset about it. I feel it's weird. I do feel partially responsible for like telling people. I can't tell them what I think I know necessarily, but I do feel somewhat responsible to be like, hey, you don't have to question Cam's toughness here. You don't have to question Cam's enthusiasm to play here, because there are people questioning those things, again, because the narrative is not being controlled. And weirdly, because we're the home of the Utes and Cam joins us every week, I'm like, hey, guys, you got to not don't put it out there that you think that he's giving up on the team because you're going to feel wrong about that, or because he's going to see that and it's going to affect him psychologically or whatever. It's strange because I feel responsible to try and control a narrative that I have no control over.
I'm with you. I didn't even text you this week about it. I just didn't want to be disappointed again. I didn't even know. I was like, I'm not going to text Sean about this, about his status, because it is sort of getting to the point where, look, Kyle Whittingham's job is obviously not to cater to us and the public and the media, but people are getting frustrated with this, right? I think there's now a level of apathy when it comes to whether or not he's going to play, because we've been fooled, maybe the wrong word, but misled for a year and a half, it feels like now. Now, we talked about this, I thought last year wasn't going to play, but still for a couple of weeks it felt like he might play. He might come back at some point. And then obviously with the finger, I think, again, just the transparency would go a long way, I think, to people, having higher expectations for his return. And then obviously what Utah, because I still think in the Big 12, it's really wide open right now. Cam Rising with the rest of the roster healthy, Utah to me is still the favorite. Kansas State looked good. I think Oklahoma State's probably not as good as we thought they would be. They got blown out by Kansas State. Colorado's a little bit better, right, especially defensively. And Iowa State. I mean, it's a much tougher conference, or the parity, I should say, is pretty much there. And if Utah has Cam healthy, to me, they're still the favorite.
How good is BYU?
Sean, I have not watched much of BYU. They have not been on my radar. They haven't played games. The Kansas State game was super late at night, and that game was really 5 minutes, right? It was 6-3, and all of a sudden it was 31-6. I mean, they scored a punt return, a fumble return. They beat a Baylor team that they were slight dogs, I think, against, but they're 5-0, right? They're over their win total 3 weeks. I think it was half. This will make the game a lot more fun if BYU is actually good. I don't know yet. They have not. I guess they did play Kansas State at home. I guess they're good. I don't know. To be fair, I've not watched much BYU. They've not been on my radar to watch.
Okay, what about Colorado? Colorado's on everyone's radar to watch. How good is Colorado?
They played their best game under Dion last Saturday. That was a complete game. That was a real football team. The things that bother Colorado, UCF can't do. So there's a specific way to beat Colorado, right? That is to hit Shadur Sanders. UCF can't do that. It's not what they're good at. And then, defensively, they can't stop a nosebleed. So both those, when you play better teams that can do the things that can stop Colorado, they're going to lose games. But the teams that can do that, they're going to do what they did on Saturday. If you can't rush the passer and stop the pass at all, and UCF's defense was awful in that game, they're going to beat you. And their defense has improved a lot this year. They're really good in the second half of games too. So they're a much better team. Again, their schedule is, I looked at it earlier, they're not a favorite in the rest of their games this year. Maybe Cincinnati. My computer's not pulling up right now. Cincinnati is at home, probably a slight favorite, but they're not a favorite against Kansas State. They won't be a favorite at Arizona. They won't be a favorite at Tech. They will not be a favorite hosting Utah or Kansas or Oklahoma State. So they won't be a favorite the rest of the game, but they won the other day as a 14-point dog, so they clearly can do it.
Jeff Schwartz, our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking all things college football. We'll get to some NFL here in a second. We started the show today talking about complicated legacies in sports because of the passing of Pete Rose, who, 83 years old, passes away, and never resolution or any reconciliation that could get him into the Baseball Hall of Fame while he was alive. First question, do you think he goes in posthumously?
No.
Okay. And then, I don't know, your favorite athlete or the best example you could think of an athlete who was great as a competitor but has a complicated legacy.
Yeah, my favorite baseball player, Barry Bonds. It's that's what it is, right? Where best player of a generation and probably won't step the Hall of Fame. Different reasons why. Barry Bonds never did anything illegal, which is funny because he took steroids, but they didn't test for steroids. So it's hard to say he did something illegal that wasn't something that baseball prioritized, making a big deal of. Pete Rose broke the ultimate rule, right? You don't gamble on the sport, and he did it. It's in the it's in every locker room and in every clubhouse about gambling and not gambling, and he broke that rule, and that's he's got to suffer that. And not only that, he never admitted it, right? He was till the end, I think, defiant about it, and then it probably hurts him in the eyes of of baseball. Rob Manfred has never met with Pete. Pete Rose wanted to be reinstated. I saw a tweet today in 2020, Sean. Rob Manfred never met with him. I think there's no chance he gets in the Hall of Fame now, especially when he hasn't. If he said, yeah, I did it, blah, 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 maybe it's easier for me in the Hall of Fame, but I don't see it happening now.
I don't see it happening either. It's a crazy thing when you talk about someone being the best hitter in the history of the game, the best hitter of his era, the best at whatever. Being best in anything in baseball for even an extended period of time, much less in the record books for it, and not making it to the Hall of Fame is absolutely bananas to me. But now that you've got Shohei Ohtani, who is a future Hall of Famer, and 50-50 this year, coming off of a major scandal and investigation, and found a fall guy for the same thing.
Yeah, well, the difference is he found a fall guy. Pete Rose did it himself. That's the big difference, right, Sean? If Pete Rose had a fall guy, maybe he wouldn't be in this spot. So that's all. All plays a role in this, right? Pete Rose, didn't have an alibi. It was on paper, right? There was records of him doing this, and he did it while a manager. Probably while he did it while as a player as well, because it feels unlikely that he did do it as a player as well. And that's the ultimate rule. You cannot mess with the integrity of the game. It's something that leagues do not stand for, and they're not going to stand for it here. And that's unfortunate because he's one of the best hitters of all time, and he just won't ever see the Hall of Fame. And it's not going to change anytime soon, in my opinion. I don't think because gambling is more prevalent now, you just automatically put him in the Hall of Fame. It's not really the way it should work.
I don't disagree with that. You should obey the rules that are in place in your era, sure. But we have adjusted our expectations on that in some other instances. All right, I can't let you get out of here without asking you at least an NFL question.
Okay.
Who's most impressive in the league right now through these, what is it, 5 weeks, 4 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, Minnesota, right? 4-0 and a sustainable model, Sean. They have an offense that we see all the time, and you're a Niners fan. You watch the Shanahan offense, man, it does wonders for everyone. And Sam Darnold's just executing really well in that offense. Defensively, what Brian Flores is doing and attacking defenses. And that game was 28-7, and they muffed a punt, the Vikings did. They got the Packers back in the game. If you catch that punt, the game is much different, right? So, it was a thorough Minnesota win against a good Packers team. They're 4-0. It's a legit 4-0. They're not slowing down anytime soon. Yeah, Darnold can maybe go into a funk at some point, but it's a sustainable model. Good offensive line, good run game, good D coordinator, get after the passer a little bit. Darnold has Jefferson and Aaron Jones and some other weapons to throw to. So, to me, it's the Vikings. And, them and the Chiefs, only 4-0 teams still left. I think the other surprise on the other side is Jacksonville being 0-4. I didn't see that coming.
How about Sam Darnold? If you handed out an MVP today, you'd have to put him in the conversation.
Yeah, well, Mahomes is the favorite for MVP right now. He's not the MVP. It probably would be Sam Darnold.
Really fascinating the way that the league is playing out. I know we're up against it, so got to let you go, but always appreciate your time, my friend. Thank you.
All right, buddy. Talk to you later.
Jeff Schwartz, kind of everything insider. Pays a lot of attention to football on both college and NFL fronts. Betting insider. Didn't get into any of the wagering conversation with him that time because we ran out of the necessary minutes, but just an absolute stud of a mind in football and other places. So.
We got some clarification on the octopus on the text line.
Yeah, dude, I actually love that people lend their wisdom to the show at 877-353-0700. So we were talking about what is thrown on the ice. I don't even know how we got there, but the tangent brought us there. And octopus in Detroit, thrown on the ice only during the playoffs. And the reason they chose an octopus, 8 tentacles represent the number of playoff games needed to win the Stanley Cup way back in the day of the original 6 NHL teams, of which, of course, Detroit was one.
The Great 8. That
is, you're getting deep on that.
Yeah, that's as as that rabbit hole we went down earlier with the orifices and such. That went dead.
Why are you bringing it back? Why are you bringing it back around? Don't do that.
But also, again, in my opinion, well, my curiosity is still, how did you get the octopus into the arena? Did you show up with like a styrofoam cooler and like, yo?
I want to know, but I don't want to know. You know?
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. But also, I mean, that's a lot of premeditation to get that, there when you throw it on the ice, so on and so forth. There's a lot that goes into it.
We are going to brainstorm. We're going to figure out. We have a week to do so before the Utah Hockey Club takes to the ice for a regular season game for the first time. It's a week from tonight. So,
a Grove Market club sandwich.
What are you throwing out there? Ooh, the Grove Market. That's a waste of a gigantic sandwich. You can't do that.
I mean, you're literally throwing that like a football.
What quintessential Utah thing are you throwing out onto the ice for the hat trick? And it can't just be a hat. Want to remind everybody, October 9th through 13th, Black Desert Resort in St. George is hosting the return of the PGA Tour to Utah. First time in more than 60 years, PGA golf will be happening within Utah's borders. BlackDesertEvents.com, at Black Desert Championship. Tickets, ground passes, VIP daily tickets, all of it still available. Black Desert Resort and BlackDesertEvents.com. PGA golf is back, baby. I'm on the group thread with my high school buddies. All of them are just like, hey, who wants to go down to this?
Not Sean O'Connell, because he hates golf.
I don't have the heart to tell him, like, I could probably find us a hookup for it, because then they're going to be mad that I don't.
The irony of there, though, is that you hate golf, and you could find us a hookup for it.
I just am not a golf guy. I don't have the money or the patience for it.
I mean, 50% of that is not true.
I don't have the disposition to be a golfer. You know me well enough now.
Yeah, you know. But I think...
Can you imagine trying to play 18 holes with me,
no,
Alonzo?
I'd only play 9 holes with you.
Exactly.
But that's fine if you only play 9. You don't have to play 18.
You know what? I start complaining after 2.5. So do you still want to play 9?
I mean, it's true. I mean, after 3 innings of baseball, you're like, oh, when are we going home?
That's not true. I love baseball at the ballpark.
What do you mean there's 2 intermissions with hockey?
Hey, that is a not-so-hot take. The intermissions are way too long for hockey.
They're both 15 minutes, right?
It's so long. Anyway, what are we throwing on the ice at Utah Hockey Club games? All right, we have to talk about most complicated athlete legacies with a local interest, maybe with a Utah interest. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700. Justin Timberlake is coming to the Delta Center January 25th, 2025. You can listen to the Spence Checketts Show for your chance to win a pair of tickets. Find details on ESPN700sports.com. All right, we've been talking about complicated athlete legacies because of the passing of Pete Rose, and he is one of those guys that he's on the short list of the most complicated legacy amongst pro athletes and beloved athletes. I asked for your responses on who's great at their gig in the sports world, who also has a complicated legacy, and people didn't have to go far. 877-353-0700 if you want to toss one my name on the Dish Bros text line right now. Urban Meyer's name came in. Rick Majerus' name came in.
Ooh.
Rick Majerus, it's interesting because we kind of just accepted his lunacy. Everyone has a story. Everyone from that era of going to Rick Majerus basketball camps or people who lived and worked up in Salt Lake City, especially delivery drivers, like pizza delivery drivers. Everyone's brother or cousin or whatever has a story of Rick Majerus ordering a pizza in the hotel he lived in and answering the door naked to get the pizza. It's just like, so there were quirks to Rick Majerus that you were just like, oh my gosh.
When I've heard some stories, and I am also like, okay, are we serious? Right? Is this real? So that's where I'm at with him, with Rick Majerus. However, there's almost too many stories for it to not be true, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Meyer was
still is.
You talk about complicated legacy. I mean, for me, Urban Meyer is three different people. The coach at University of Utah, at least the one that someone who was on the roster but not like in his inner circle was able to see, was a guy that you could look up to, a guy you could admire. And then obviously things went south somewhere along the way at University of Florida with the way the team was allowed to run amok, and then, whatever else that was going on at Ohio State. And so Urban Meyer, I think, has some complications to that legacy, sure.
You watched the Netflix thing, right?
Which Netflix thing? The Swamp Kings?
Yeah.
Yes.
What was your takeaway on that?
First of all, did they barely scratch the surface?
Oh, 100%.
They needed a full week of those things. But I thought it was one of the more – it was Untold is the series. I thought it was one of the poorer executions of their untold stories.
Like Cam Newton's on his YouTube channel talked about, like, y'all didn't even talk about it.
That's what I mean. Like, yeah. I don't know who they were trying to protect. I don't know who they were insulating. I don't know if there's, like, skeletons in the Tim Tebow closet that they didn't want to get into, whatever. But there were just common knowledge of stuff that they didn't even touch on. They didn't even mention about the Pounceys and, obviously the Aaron Hernandez stuff went a lot deeper than that. So there was a lot that could have been added to that. I want to say this. Cameron Rising is on the precipice of having a complicated legacy at the University of Utah. I'm on the record, and I will say I don't think it's going to end up complicated. I think that Cam Rising is going to come back after this bye week. He's going to play well enough that when he leaves this program, he's either given you 3 conference championships, which makes him the GOAT all-time, all is forgiven, we'll laugh about this mess and the lack of communication coming out of the program. Or even if that doesn't happen for Utah this year, even if he can't deliver that, he will come back, he will play, and he will be good enough that you're talking about and remembering fondly that he gave you 2 Pac-12 championships and some of the greatest moments in the history of Utah football. That's what I believe is going to happen with Cameron Rising. I've been wrong about things before, and that's why I bring it up as part of this conversation. If Cam Rising can't manifest that, can't get the hand right, can't get whatever is bothering him to be less of a bother, and doesn't win you any more football games at the University of Utah, now we're talking about a very complicated legacy because he gave you some of the highest highs in program history and then was the centerpiece of some low lows. And the knee injury and the hand injury are not his fault. Okay? Injuries are something that happens, but the narrative is going to change about the way injuries are handled in this program, the way communication is handled in this program, based on him. There's things outside of his control. There's things that are inside of his control. And the things that are scariest right now for Utah football fans, if they come to pass, we have this conversation in 2 years or 5 years, and Cam Rising's name comes up in the conversation.
Well, I mean, at the very least, you absolutely cannot question his toughness. I often think, like when I've seen him kind of be dragged a little bit online, I think often about like, hey, remember that time in the championship game when he got cracked and his helmet flew this way, he goes that way, and he got up like it was nothing?
Yeah.
Like, you can't question his toughness. And so, if anything, I think you can make an argument if, let's say the end is he doesn't come back from injury, which obviously no one hopes that's what it is. But if, let's say that's what it is, at the very least, you can say he's a polarizing figure.
Which, even then, I don't, like, I understand all the frustration, but if this is all injury-based, you can't really, like, blame the player.
No. I mean, because it's a contact sport. That's a part of the deal.
And that's, look, it's a bad situation for you as a Utah fan if you're somebody who paid into the NIL fund and a bunch of that money went to Cam Rising and you don't feel like you're getting a return on investment. It is human nature for you to be upset about it. That's fine. But unless someone comes to me, someone reliable comes to me, and it's just like, he just isn't committed anymore, he just doesn't want to play anymore, I'm not really here for the arguments of like Cam Rising has lost the step or Cam Rising has lost it or whatever. Patience is a difficult virtue for all of us to exercise, and patience when you don't have knowledge of what's going on with this injury is even more difficult. And I really do believe it would be in the best interest of the program for them to give Cam a green light to come on this show, or for somebody for Kyle Whittingham to sit down at his press conference and do what Jeff Schwartz just talked about. Say, hey, here's the deal. All right. I don't like to talk about injuries. We didn't think it was going to be season ending. It's not season ending, but Cam Rising has X amount of damage on whatever hand or finger, or it's actually his knee that flared back up, or whatever the hell it is, and just control the narrative before it spins out of control. Because you have a situation right now that if it extends beyond this bye week is completely untenable.
So what you're saying is if it extends past Arizona State, there's going to be pitchforks at the Eccles football
And by the
facility.
way, everyone's going to feel justified in that regard, and it might just come down to like the dude is hurt again, and you can't hate on someone for being hurt. Like,
No, and I mean, we all saw the injury. I mean, we all saw it. I mean, my guy got hit and thrown into Gatorade coolers. That happened, and we all saw it.
It's the social media presence, and I don't use social media as a litmus test very often because it gets ugly out there.
Yeah.
It's more like the group threads I'm on with former players and guys I know and people that feel like they have some kind of in some kind of context. And like the amount of frustration that is mounting right now is threatening to complicate the legacy of Cam Rising. I'm telling you, a return and a win against Arizona State washes it all away, wipes it all away. You go on, you beat Colorado, you beat BYU. Everyone's like, yay, this is wonderful. If you play in the conference championship game, everyone just call this as a blip on the radar. And it just feels so big right now because you're coming off a loss where you look at that game and you say, if he was there, we wouldn't have lost that game. That might not even be true. But that's where your mind goes as a Utah football fan. So I don't like this part of the conversation. We're talking about complicated athlete legacies, and there is a risk if this doesn't get resolved, if this narrative doesn't get handled properly by the program and by Cam, there's some complications in what is otherwise one of the great Utah football legacies.
I've not asked you this, circling it back to the original premise of the question-ish, kind of. Does Pete Rose get into the Hall of Fame?
I think no. I think that baseball, more than any other sport, is steeped in its traditions and its old ways, and they've had a really, really hard time turning that Titanic around. You know what I mean? It's just not the nature of baseball. And that's one of the things we love about it, and that's also, in a case like this one of the reasons why people might have problems with it. Because baseball is drawing revenue from betting sources now. And they're going to treat one of their all-time greats a certain type of way because he broke a betting rule. But there's enough purists out there, enough purist thought process out there for people to be like, no, we don't owe him anything. He's out. He violated the rule. And Pete and his estate and all the people around Pete, I think, could have handled the last 40 years better, and that might have changed the way that this conversation happens now. It feels ghoulish to be having this conversation.
Yeah, I'm not stoked about it.
Because he's he's also like a human who passed away, and his family is probably grieving and hurting and doesn't want to hear some yahoo in Salt Lake City being like, well, you broke a rule. It's like, but unfortunately, that's your legacy. And that's why we talked about these complicated legacies, because the best thing that can happen to you as a person and as an athlete is to have a very uncomplicated look back. For the epitaph, for the obituary to be short and sweet and simple and positive.
Well, I mean,
the Kembe Mutombo style.
Yeah, I mean, baseball has so many of these guys.
Yeah.
That it's like in this game that we're watching, there's two guys on that team, Alex Bregman and Jose Altuve, who cheated, but should be first ballot Hall of Famers, no question, right? But they're tied to a cheating scandal. And then on the other side of that diamond, the manager of the Detroit Tigers, who was the manager of the Houston Astros during all of that, A.J. Hinch, also has tarnished his good-for-nothing career.
Well, I see what you did there.
See what I did there?
All right, trivia question coming for you next. We'll give away some Farmer and Chemist, $25 gift card to Farmer and Chemist, and Billy Joel and Sting for May 23rd at the Delta Center. And we'll have a little crosstalk with Spence Checketts. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700. All right, this is a deep cut of the trivia question today. I only said it one time, so you had to have been paying attention.
Well, that means I lost.
Yeah, you don't pay attention to what I say. $25 to Farmer and Chemist and Billy Joel tickets when he comes to the Delta Center. If you can answer me this question, Travis Hunter.
Rice-Eccles Stadium.
What? He's coming to where?
Billy Joel and Sting are at the Rice-Eccles Stadium.
Why does it say Delta Center in the copy?
That's not correct.
Okay, Rice-Eccles Stadium. That's way better. That means I can sit out on my back deck and listen to Billy Joel crooning.
Crooning.
In any case, 877-353-0700 for a gift card to Farmer and Chemist and for tickets. You got to pick up Farmer and Chemist down there on historic Main Street in Midvale at the store. Travis Hunter allows this passer rating against Travis Hunter. When you're throwing at Travis Hunter, what is the passer rating of those opposing passers in this 2024 season? I only said it one time, but it was a really absurd, really good number. So if you can text that in, wow, man, people are good. People are listening and paying attention. I appreciate that. Sean O'Connell Show here on a Tuesday. Spence Checketts in the drive coming up next. Hey, Spence.
Sean, how are you today, buddy?
Doing great.
Good.
I carried a theme through the show today in respect to Pete Rose passing, and I think juxtaposed with Dikembe Mutombo passing, who had a very uncomplicated legacy in sports.
For sure.
We know exactly what he is, and we have a certain opinion about him as a player and as a human. Pretty straightforward. I think that's overwhelmingly positive in that case. And Pete Rose, it's a lot more complicated. So the greatest athlete in the Spence Checketts mind that has a complicated legacy.
Great question. And the fact of the matter is most of them do, right? Even the ones you don't know about.
Yeah.
The instant reaction in my mind is Michael Jordan. Michael was very careful with his public image. The famous phrase, Republicans wear shoes too. Never
Which is
went there.
part of what complicates the legacy now, but yes.
For sure. Never went there at all. But there are so many things, a lot of them are known behind the scenes with Mike, and a lot of things that are just kind of rumors. You know, it's funny. I had David Stern on my show before, obviously, he passed. In fact, it was when I was podcast only. I had David Stern on my podcast, and I'm quite sure that it was the last interview he did.
Wow.
Mike Wise and I have a debate because Mike had him on his podcast too, but I think I had him after Mike. I think it was the last interview he did before he passed. I remember I was at my son's soccer game the week after we released the pod, and I got a text that he had passed. And I asked David Stern straight up, I said, did you ask Michael Jordan to step away from the game because of the gambling accusations? And there's still this underlying thing, like it was so bad that the NBA asked Mike to take some time off, and so he decided to try his hand at baseball. The other side of it is Michael Jordan's father was murdered, and he wanted some time away, and Michael Jordan's father wanted Michael Jordan to play baseball. But it's interesting how unknown most of the stuff is to the public because he, in my opinion, is the greatest athlete of our generation, greatest basketball player, period. That will never change. Due respect to LeBron, who's awesome. But certainly a lot of stuff behind the scenes with the gambling stuff, a lot of stuff behind the scenes with his wife. You know, he's on his second wife. You know, no judgment there. The instant reaction is Michael Jordan, but we could go down the list, Babe Ruth. Like, the fact of the matter is, they say never meet your heroes, right? And there's a reason for that. John Stockton is one here locally. That a lot of people wondered why he wasn't more front-facing with his stardom and how much people loved him here. He just didn't really care. You know, so what's your answer? Did you have one?
The lowest hanging fruit is Karl Malone.
Sure.
For me.
Sure.
When you talk about, like, the local front.
Yep.
And Karl was, when you talk about complicated, right, there's a lot of layers to that onion, and a lot of it is public knowledge now, and it wasn't back in the day.
Right.
And there's a lot of things, if you know, you're a big football follower, you know that he has a son who doesn't even have his name on the back of the jersey.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And it's just like, especially if you're a family person yourself, if you have kids yourself, it's unimaginable. And you're like, okay, so Karl Malone, and then everything you heard about him as a player, and you knew about him as a player, you're just like, well, that's one of the all-time greats, undeniably. And then you hear about all the other stuff. You're like, wow, there's some complications there.
Yeah.
And, some great suggestions were brought in. Urban Meyer was a good one,
Sure.
a good example. Reggie Bush. Obviously, these are all for very different reasons.
Sure.
In the MMA world, John Jones, who's arguably, almost inarguably in my mind, the all-time great, best fighter.
Oh, really?
Is an absolute mess of a human.
Yeah.
Right? I
Yeah.
mean, suspensions for steroids, for cocaine, domestic abuse allegations, and all this stuff. So it's like, yeah, there's the ones we know a lot about, and there's the ones that we'll never know about. And there's but it is that thing, like, you're not supposed to worship these guys as heroes because most of the time they're not. And Dikembe Mutombo, I brought him up as an example of like that's someone that everything we knew about him was just like endearing.
Sure.
And you hope that's all that there is.
Yeah.
And until I know something else, that's what I'm going with.
Yeah, I was privy to a lot of stuff at a young age that I really wasn't aware that was going on, namely marriages in pro sports. Yeah. A lot of them and I'm talking about like even some of the guys that you think like, oh, he's a great husband, great father. There's just kind of a deal like, hey, you'll always have 2 commas in your bank account. And when I'm on a road trip, don't hit me up. I'm just going to do what I got to do. And a lot of partners are okay with that, right? Financial security in the name of letting your husband live his life when he's not at home. That is way more commonplace than I ever thought until I was kind of exposed to it. And, it's the old thing, man, whether it's athletes, whether it's musicians, whether it's actors, like how much do you want to know about the people whose talent you consume? And more often than not, you're going to find some stuff under the surface that you're not comfortable with. Then it's up to you to decide whether or not you want to keep watching, listening, whatever it is for musicians, athletes, actors, anyone in entertainment. And oftentimes the most talented people have the most skeletons in the closet where you find out about it. Then it's up to you as the consumer to decide what you want to do.
It was also interesting on the show as we were talking about it to kind of learn what people consider to be complicated.
Sure.
And what people like. A lot of that extramarital stuff you're talking about, I think many people just assume is part of the deal now.
Yeah.
And they don't make judgments based on that.
Sure.
And I brought up Tom Brady as a guy whose legacy is not complicated and maybe should be a little bit more so. And got a little pushback from that, like, what's wrong with Tom Brady? And it's like, you just assume the best about Tom Brady because of who he is. And
right.
It's really interesting the way that we make these judgments. And I made it clear on the show, these are just judgments, and you're not supposed to do that.
Sure.
But it was an interesting conversation, and thank you to everyone who offered their feedback because it was a good show. It's
a good topic. Also, there are people that have way more knowledge of the situation that totally believe Ray Lewis just straight killed a guy, right? I don't know. I wasn't there.
Dude, that one, we also brought that up because, I've become friendly with Ray because he's he's an investor with the PFL, and he's around the league a lot. And we, I name dropped our guy Weddle when the first time I met Ray, and we've had multiple long conversations about football and a lot of things. And he treats me like gold. He's awesome. He's a really, really, really cool guy. And then you got this little thing in the back of your mind where you're just like, huh.
Did you really do it?
What is going on
and
there?
Did you get away with it because you were awesome at the time at what you did?
There's a lot to it.
Yeah, there is.
So
it's a good topic. Really good topic.
And by the way, Shohei Ohtani and Pete Rose are not too far apart from each other in their predilections. And one of those guys is a sure thing Hall of Famer, and the other guy is now posthumously hoping that maybe you'll get him.
And what really does that mean? I mean, make his family happy? I don't know. I always thought he should have been in. I mean, there's the whole conversation about, and the baseball writers of America are they're the worst, man. The worst gatekeepers there are. When you look at some of the stuff that exists with existing members of the Baseball Hall of Fame, what does he have? 70 more hits than whoever's in second place, the most at-bats of all time, most hits of all time. MVP 17 time. The man should have been enshrined in the Hall of Fame years ago. But that's how, it in the NFL, was it Calvin Ridley who was caught gambling and suspended for an entire year? I can't remember the wide receiver. But, there's always this conversation about, all right, NFL, domestic violence, do you look the other way? But you gambled on a game and you're gone for a year, right? So to your point, it depends on what's important to you.
Yeah.
And it depends on, if you want to keep consuming the content from somebody whose behavior you don't agree with. It's a tale as old as time.
What's on the drive?
A lot of college football, a little NFL today. We'll do a little jazz, a little hockey club as well. So good guest list. We've got Scott Mitchell. We've got Bill Riley. We've got Joe Fortenbaugh for some Monday Night Football and NFL stuff. And then Richard Smith in studio, talk a little jazz. So kind of what we do every day.
All right, tomorrow on the Sean O'Connell Show, Utah cross-country head coach Kyle Kepler, Rob Bradford from Baseball Isn't Boring, Scott Mitchell, my guy Zachariah for the third hour of the show. Lots to get into. Stay tuned for The Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700.